we explore the question that the Harry Potter books never quite ask directly. What happens when the Chosen One decides that playing by the rules isn't working? What if Harry Potter, after watching Sirius fall through the veil, after learning the prophecy, after 5 years of the wizarding world failing to protect anyone, looked at the dark arts and saw not evil, but efficiency, not corruption, but capability, not Voldemort's path, but a shortcut that the light side couldn't offer? What happens when a good person picks up bad tools for good reasons and discovers that the tools work, but that working and being safe are not the same thing? This is not a story about Harry Potter turning evil. This is a story about Harry Potter turning effective and learning that the distance between those two things is shorter than anyone told him. The library at Grimmauld Place was where it started. He hadn't been looking for dark magic, because he was looking for anything at all. The summer after 5th year sat on him like weather, dense, pressing, the kind of atmospheric weight that made everything harder. Sirius was dead. The prophecy was real. Neither must die while the other survives, which meant that one of them was going to kill the other, and Harry was 16 and had approximately the combat training of a well-meaning garden gnome. He couldn't sleep. He hadn't been sleeping since the Department of Mysteries, since the Veil, since the sound Sirius had made. Or hadn't made, that was the problem. There had been no sound. Just the falling and the absence and the curtain moving in a breeze that came from nowhere. So he went to the library at 2 a.m, because the library was the only room in Grimmauld Place that didn't remind him of Sirius in a way he couldn't manage. The Black Family Library was not the Hogwarts Library. The Hogwarts Library had a restricted section, and the restricted section was restricted. The Black Family Library was the restricted section. Every shelf, every book, every scroll, dark arts, ancient magic, blood magic, curse theory, the complete collected knowledge of a family that had spent centuries studying the worst things magic could do and filing them under family tradition. Harry pulled a book off the shelf because it was at eye level and because the spine said Principles of Magical Combat, a Practical Guide. He opened it. The first chapter was a comparison of standard defensive magic, shield charms, disarming spells, stunners, against their dark counterparts. The comparison was clinical, academic, presented with the dispassionate clarity of a textbook. The shield charm, the book explained, was a wall. It stood between you and the incoming spell and absorbed the impact. It was limited by the caster's power, by the angle of the incoming spell, by the nature of the magic being shielded against. There were spells that went through shield charms. There were spells that went around them. The shield charm was the wizarding world's equivalent of holding up a board and hoping it was big enough. The dark alternative was called a reflective inversion. It didn't block the incoming spell, it caught it and sent it back, augmented by the caster's own power, along the same trajectory. The incoming spell became the outgoing spell. The attacker's strength was turned against them. Harry stared at the page. The Department of Mysteries came back to him, about standing behind a shield charm while Death Eaters threw curses that his shield couldn't hold. About Sirius, who had been better than Harry, faster than Harry, more experienced than Harry, and who had still fallen. He read the next chapter. By 4 a.m, he had read 6 chapters. The book was not evil. It was not cackling or pulsing with dark energy or whispering seductive promises. It was a textbook. It described dark combat magic with the same matter-of-fact precision that standard book of spells described levitation charms. It was clear, practical, and devastating in its implications. The dark arts were better at combat than the magic Harry had been taught, functionally better. Faster, more versatile, more effective against skilled opponents. The book explained why. Standard magic, the magic taught at Hogwarts, the magic approved by the Ministry, the magic of the light, was designed to be safe. Safe to learn, safe to practice, safe to use. The safety was built into the magic itself, how guardrails were built into a staircase. You couldn't accidentally kill someone with Expelliarmus. You couldn't accidentally destroy your own soul with Stupefy. Dark magic had no guardrails. The guardrails had been removed deliberately, because the guardrails limited what the magic could do. A shield charm that couldn't be broken was more useful than one that could. A curse that killed was more decisive than one that stunned. The dark arts were magic with the safety features stripped out. Harry closed the book at 5 a.m. He sat in the library at Grimmauld Place with the book in his lap and thought about Sirius, and about the prophecy, and about the fact that he was supposed to defeat the most powerful dark wizard of the century, and that his primary combat training consisted of Expelliarmus and a Patronus. He put the book back on the shelf. He went to bed. He came back the next night. The second night, he read about intent. This was the chapter that changed things, though he didn't know it at the time. The chapter was called The Architecture of Dark Casting, and it explained something that Harry had never been taught at Hogwarts, something that reframed everything he thought he knew about magic. All magic, the book said, was powered by intent. This was taught in first year. You had to want the spell to work. But standard magic required only shallow intent. You wanted the feather to float, you wanted the door to unlock, you wanted the light to shine. The intent was directional. Point and shoot. Dark magic required deep intent. The Cruciatus Curse didn't work because you pointed your wand and said the word. It worked because you meant it. You had to want to cause pain. You had to hold the pain you intended in your mind while you cast. The curse drew its power from the caster's emotional commitment to the outcome. This was why the dark arts were difficult. Some of the most devastating dark curses had simple incantations and minimal wand movement. Because the emotional requirement was extreme, you had to invest yourself in the magic in a way that standard spells didn't demand. And this was why the dark arts changed people. Through practice. Every time you cast a dark spell, you practiced the emotional state that powered it. You practiced wanting to cause pain, wanting to control, wanting to destroy. You trained the muscle. The muscle got stronger with use. The emotional baseline shifted. Harry sat with this information at 3 a.m. and thought about Bellatrix Lestrange. Bellatrix was insane. Everyone said so. But she hadn't started insane. She'd been a black, brilliant and proud and capable, and she'd gone to Voldemort and she'd practiced the dark arts for decades, and the practice had done what practice does. It had made her more of what the practice required. Snape came to mind. Who had practiced the dark arts as a teenager, and who had come back from them, and who was, by all accounts, one of the most skilled practitioners alive. Snape wasn't insane. Snape was bitter and cold and difficult, but he wasn't Bellatrix. He'd managed it. Harry thought, can you learn the tools without becoming the tools? He didn't have an answer. He kept reading. The third week, Harry was practicing. The theory first, not the dark spells yet. The wand movements, without incantation. The breathing patterns that the book described for deep intent casting, which were different from standard casting, how sprinting differed from walking. The physical preparation for a type of magic he hadn't decided to use. He told himself he was preparing. That knowing about the dark arts was different from using them. That understanding the enemy's weapons was basic tactical intelligence, the kind of thing any competent fighter would do. He told himself this every morning while he ate breakfast with Molly Weasley, who was kind and warm and who had no idea what Harry was reading at 3 a.m. "You're looking peaky, dear," Molly said, at breakfast in the third week. "I'm fine," Harry said. "You're not sleeping," she said. "I'm sleeping enough," Harry said. "Ron," across the table, looked at Harry with the expression that Harry was learning to recognize as Ron's assessment mode, the look that said Ron was filing something without committing to a response. "What are you doing at night?" Ron said. "Reading," Harry said. "Reading what?" "Defense theory," Harry said. This was technically true. The book was about defense, among other things. The fact that the defense involved dark magic was a detail Harry was not sharing. "Since when do you read defense theory voluntarily?" Hermione said, from behind her own book. "Since I found out I have to fight Voldemort or die," Harry said. The table went quiet. Hermione put her book down. Ron's expression shifted from assessment to concern. "Harry," Hermione said. "It's fine," Harry said. "I just need to be better prepared than I was last year. That's all." "We should train together," Hermione said. "We could. I'm doing fine on my own," Harry said. Hermione looked at him. Ron looked at him. They both had the expression of people who had heard something in Harry's tone that didn't fit, that was harder than it should have been, that sounded like a door being held closed. Harry got up from the table. "I'm going to the library. It's 9 a.m, Ron said. "I know," Harry said. He went. In August, he cast his first dark spell, nothing as dramatic as an unforgivable. A spell called Vulnera Serpentia, which was a cutting curse, more precise and more damaging than Sectum Sempra, and with the advantage of being controllable after release. The book described it as a directed lacerating hex with variable depth and persistent wound characteristics. He cast it at a wall in the basement of Grimmauld Place where nobody would hear at 2 a.m. The spell required intent. The deep kind, beyond what standard spells demanded. Harry had to hold in his mind the image of cutting, of the wall opening under the force of his will, of the stone parting like flesh. He held the image, he said the incantation, he moved the wand. The wall opened. A clean, deep cut, 6 inches long, in solid stone. Harry stared at it. The feeling was he didn't have a word for it. Something beyond simple power. Clarity. The magic had felt clear in a way that standard spells didn't. When he cast Stupefy, the magic went through him like water through a pipe. He was the conduit, the magic was the force, the outcome was somewhere down the line. When he cast Vulnera Serpentia, the magic went through him like blood through a vein. It was his, part of him, connected to him at every point of the journey. He could feel the cut happening. He was in the cut. He stood in the basement and looked at the wall and understood for the first time why people went down this road. Not because they were evil, because the magic was better. It was more intimate, more responsive, more alive. Standard magic was a tool. Dark magic was an extension. He repaired the wall with a standard charm. The repair was adequate, functional, unremarkable, the magic equivalent of filling in a form. The cut had been art. He went upstairs. He didn't sleep. He didn't try. September, Hogwarts. Harry arrived at Hogwarts for 6th year, carrying 3 books from the Grimmauld Place library in his trunk, concealed under a Notice Me Not charm that he'd also learned from one of the books. The charm was technically classified as grey magic, not dark by ministry standards, but not taught at Hogwarts, because it edged into the territory of concealment and deception that the school preferred to pretend didn't exist. He had Dumbledore's lessons to attend. The Horcrux lessons, which Dumbledore had arranged over the summer, the trips through the Pensieve, the history of Tom Riddle, the building of the case for what Voldemort had done to his soul. Harry attended these with genuine attention, because the Horcrux information was critical, and because Dumbledore's strategic mind was doing something Harry respected, building a complete picture before acting. But underneath the attention was a new layer of evaluation that Harry hadn't had before. Dumbledore was showing him what Voldemort had done, how the dark arts had been used to fracture a soul and anchor it to objects. the mechanics of Horcrux creation, murder as a catalyst, the soul splitting from the act of supreme evil, the fragment lodged in a physical vessel. Harry was looking at the same information from a different angle. The dark magic Voldemort had used was extreme, the outer edge of what was possible, the point where dark magic became not just dark, but catastrophically self-destructive. But the techniques underneath the extremity were functional. The principles of soul magic, of enchantment binding, of protective warding that Voldemort had used to hide his Horcruxes, these were not exclusively evil. They were knowledge. Knowledge that could be applied to different ends. "Harry," Dumbledore said in their third lesson. "You seem contemplative." "I'm thinking about the protections," Harry said. "On the Horcruxes. The wards that Voldemort put around them." "Yes?" Dumbledore said. "Could those wards be used defensively?" Harry said. "Not to protect a Horcrux, but to protect anything? A place? A person?" Dumbledore looked at him with the blue eyes that did the thing they always did. The assessment, the seeing through, the gentle but thorough scan of whatever was underneath the surface. "The principles of protective warding are well established," Dumbledore said carefully. "The wards Voldemort used are variations of known enchantments, pushed to extremes. The same principles could, in theory, be applied to other forms of protection, but they're not taught," Harry said. "They are not taught at Hogwarts," Dumbledore said. "Why?" Harry said. "Because the deeper forms of protective warding require intent that borders on obsession," Dumbledore said. "The caster must want the protection to hold with a depth of commitment that changes the caster." "Changes how?" Harry said. Dumbledore said nothing. The office clicked softly around them. "When you care about protecting something deeply enough to power a ward of that nature," Dumbledore said, "you become someone for whom the thing being protected matters more than anything else, including your own judgment, including the welfare of other people, including the rules that separate acceptable magic from what lies beyond. You become obsessive," Harry said. "You become effective," Dumbledore said. "And effectiveness, when unchecked by the constraints that make us humane, is the most dangerous quality a wizard can possess." Harry looked at Dumbledore. "You're describing yourself," Harry said. The silence that followed was not comfortable. "Perhaps," Dumbledore said. "I have been effective in my life, at considerable cost." "Grindelwald," Harry said. Dumbledore's expression did something very controlled. "Among other things," Dumbledore said. "Harry, I am telling you this because I recognize something in the questions you're asking, in the direction your thinking is going. I recognize it because I went there once when I was young, and the going there cost me everything that mattered." "You came back," Harry said. "I came back," Dumbledore said. "But some of what I lost on the way out didn't come back with me." Harry heard this. He filed it. He did not change course. October, the first use in a real situation. It happened in Defense Against the Dark Arts, which was being taught by Snape this year. Snape's defense classes were aggressive, combat-focused, and genuinely useful in a way that no previous defense teachers had been. Harry respected this even while finding Snape personally unbearable. The lesson was on nonverbal casting. Snape had paired the students up and told them to practice nonverbal jinxes and shields. Harry was paired with Draco Malfoy, which was Snape being Snape. Draco cast a leglocker curse. Non-verbally, Harry blocked it with a standard shield charm. Draco cast a stinging jinx. Harry blocked it. Draco cast something harder. Harry didn't recognize the wand movement, but the impact against his shield was heavier than a school-level hex. Harry's shield held. Barely. And then, without deciding to, without the conscious choice that the books had described as necessary for dark casting, Harry responded. Not with Stupefy, not with Expelliarmus, with the reflective inversion he'd read about in July. The spell caught Draco's next jinx, reversed it, amplified it, and sent it back. Draco went down, hard, his nose broke. Blood was immediate and dramatic. The classroom went silent. Snape was across the room in 3 seconds. He looked at Draco on the floor, at the blood, at Harry standing with his wand out and his face doing something he hadn't controlled. "What?" Snape said, in the voice that was quieter than shouting and considerably more dangerous. "Was that?" "He cast at me," Harry said. "I reflected it." "That was not a standard reflection charm," Snape said. His eyes were narrow. "That was... Potter, where did you learn that?" "I read about it," Harry said. "Where?" Snape said. "A book," Harry said. "Which book?" "I don't remember the title," Harry said, which was a lie, and which Snape recognized as a lie immediately, because Snape recognized lies how a dog recognized rabbits, by instinct and with immediate interest. "Stay after class," Snape said. He healed Draco's nose with a flick and sent everyone back to their pairs. "After class? The conversation, Potter," Snape said. "What you used in class was a reflective inversion. It is classified as dark magic by the Ministry. It is not taught at Hogwarts. It is not in any book available to students. Where did you find it?" Harry said nothing. "If you have been reading material from the restricted section..." "Not the restricted section," Harry said. "Then where?" Harry met Snape's eyes. He held them, which was a thing he could do now because his occlumency had improved dramatically over the summer. Not through Snape's brutal lessons, but through the meditation techniques in the Dark Combat Manual, which treated mental discipline as a prerequisite for deep intent casting. Snape noticed the occlumency. His eyes narrowed further. "You've been practicing mind magic," Snape said. "It wasn't a question." "I've been practicing defense," Harry said. "Defense does not include reflective inversions and advanced occlumency from sources I cannot identify," Snape said. "Potter, if you have been accessing dark arts materials, are you going to tell Dumbledore?" Harry said. Snape looked at him. The look was complicated. It was the look of a man who had walked this exact road at approximately this exact age, and who was seeing, in the boy in front of him, the beginning of a pattern he recognized intimately. "I should," Snape said. "But," Harry said. "But the reflective inversion was competently cast," Snape said, "and the occlumency work you've done is surprisingly structured. Whatever you've been reading it well." "That's not a compliment," Harry said. "No," Snape said. "It isn't." They looked at each other across the desk. Teacher and student, spy and target, two people who understood the dark arts from different directions, and who were both, in their own ways, standing at the edge of something. 20 points from Gryffindor, Snape said, for using classified magic on a fellow student. "And Potter?" "Yes? Whatever you're doing," Snape said, "be aware that the road feels shorter on the way in than on the way out." Harry left the classroom. In the corridor, he pressed his back against the stone wall and felt the adrenaline ebbing, and underneath the adrenaline, the thing he didn't want to name. Satisfaction. The spell had worked. It had worked perfectly. Draco's jinx had come back amplified, and the precision of it, the clean, sharp efficiency of dark combat magic, had been exactly what the book had promised. It was better than standard magic. It was measurably, demonstrably better. And it had felt good. That was the part he didn't want to think about. Beyond the power, the feeling, the clarity, the way the magic had moved through him as part of him rather than through him as a conduit. The intimacy of it. He went to lunch. He ate. He did not think about it. He thought about it constantly. Hermione was the first to notice. Hermione hadn't seen the reflective inversion. She hadn't been in that defense class. She noticed the behavior. The reading at 3 a.m, the new stillness in Harry's eyes that hadn't been there before the summer. The way he answered questions about what he was studying with answers that were technically true and completely uninformative. "What are you doing?" she said, in the library in November. The Hogwarts library where they were supposed to be studying for potions. "Studying," Harry said. "You're not studying potions," she said. "You've been sitting with that book for an hour and you haven't turned a page." Harry looked down. He hadn't been reading the potions textbook. He'd been thinking about ward theory, the protective enchantments from the Grimmauld Place library, the things Dumbledore had said about obsessive protection, the mathematical architecture of dark warding that was elegant in a way that standard wards were not. "I'm thinking," Harry said. "About what?" "Defense," Harry said. "Harry," Hermione said. She put her own book down. "You've been saying defense for 3 months. Every time I ask what you're working on, you say defense. But you're not working on defense class material. Your marks in defense are fine. They've actually improved, which is suspicious because you're not studying the curriculum." "How is improved marks suspicious?" Harry said. "Because you're not working at it," she said. "I can tell when someone's working at improvement. You're not struggling with anything in defense class. You're performing, going through the motions. The real work you're doing is somewhere else." Harry looked at her. Hermione Granger, who noticed everything, who catalogued patterns the way other people breathed. He had known this confrontation was coming. He had been preparing for it. "I've been reading ahead," he said. "In what?" she said. "Advanced defense material," he said. "From where?" she said. "Books," he said. "Harry," she said, and her voice had the tone that meant she was done with the diplomatic approach. "I found a ward on your trunk. A notice me not charm. I found it because I recognized the casting pattern. It's not from any textbook I've read, which means it's from a source that isn't in the Hogwarts curriculum. I've been researching, and the only sources that teach that variant of the charm are..." Her face changed. The change was not subtle. It went from frustrated to alarmed in about half a second. "Dark arts texts," she said. "Harry, you've been reading dark arts texts." He said nothing. "Where are they?" she said. "In your trunk? Under the ward?" "Hermione, where are they?" she said. Her voice was tight. "I'm not doing anything wrong," Harry said. "You're reading material classified as dark by the ministry that refused to acknowledge Voldemort for a year," Harry said. "The ministry that sent Dementors to attack me. The ministry that put Umbridge in our school." "That ministry?" "The classification exists for a reason. The classification exists to keep people compliant," Harry said. "To make sure nobody learns the things that might actually be effective against..." "Against what?" she said. "Harry, effective against what?" "Against him," Harry said. "Against Voldemort. Against Bellatrix. Against the Death Eaters who killed Sirius while I stood there with Expelliarmus and watched." The air between them changed. Hermione's face was doing multiple things at once. Concern, understanding, fear. The analytical engine running underneath all of it, trying to process what Harry was telling her. "Sirius didn't die because your spells weren't strong enough," Hermione said. "Sirius died because I was outmatched," Harry said. "Every fight I've been in, the graveyard, the ministry, the chamber, all of them, I've survived by luck. Not skill. Luck, the wands connecting, the phoenix feather, my mum's sacrifice. I have never won a fight through superior magic. That doesn't mean, it means I need to be better," Harry said. "And the curriculum isn't making me better fast enough." Hermione looked at him for a long time. "What have you cast?" she said. "What? What dark spells have you cast?" she said. "I know you've cast at least one because your defense performance has changed and Snape is watching you differently. What have you used?" Harry considered lying. Decided against it. "A reflective inversion," he said. "On Malfoy. In defense class." "A reflective..." She stopped. "That's combat magic. That's classified as..." "It worked," Harry said. It reflected his jinx back at double strength, and I controlled the entire cast. I've never had that level of control with standard magic. That's because standard magic doesn't require the same depth of intent, Harry said. I know. I've read about it. The deep intent. The emotional investment. The way dark magic connects to the caster at a level that standard magic doesn't. And you don't find that concerning? She said. I find it effective, he said. Harry, she said, effective is not the same as safe. I know, he said, but I'd rather be effective and unsafe than safe and dead. She was quiet. He could see the argument building behind her eyes, the counterpoints, the references, the 18 things she wanted to say. She was choosing which one mattered most. I'm going to research this, she said. The effects. What happens to people who practice dark magic extensively? I want you to read what I find. Fine, he said. And I want you to promise me something, she said. What? That if I show you evidence that what you're doing is dangerous, not theoretically, not hypothetically, actual evidence, you'll stop. He looked at her. At his best friend, who was frightened for him and who was doing the most Hermione thing possible, fighting fear with research. I'll read what you find, he said. That's not a promise to stop, she said. No, he said. It isn't. Ron noticed differently. Ron didn't notice the magic. Ron noticed Harry. The change was in the small things. How Harry held his wand, not the grip, which was physically the same, but the relationship between hand and wand, which had shifted from the casual hold of a tool to the integrated grip of an extension. How Harry looked at people in corridors, assessing, measuring, the calculation running behind the eyes that was not hostile but was no longer entirely friendly. How Harry sat in the common room at night, not talking, not reading, just present, occupying space with a stillness that Ron had never seen in him before, and that reminded Ron uncomfortably of someone. You're sitting like Snape, Ron said in November. What? Harry said. The way you're sitting, Ron said. Still watching. Snape does that. He sits in a room and he watches everyone and you can tell he's evaluating. I'm just sitting, Harry said. No, Ron said. You're doing the thing where you look at someone and you're thinking about what they can do and whether they're a threat. You've been doing it all term. He stopped. It's what? Harry said. It's not you, Ron said. Harry looked at him. Ron was looking back, with the expression that Harry had come to associate with Ron at his most honest, the face that happened when Ron stopped managing his own insecurity and spoke from the place underneath it, the place where Ron's instincts lived. Something's different about you, Ron said. Since the summer. Since Sirius. Sirius died, Harry said. That changes a person. Not like this, Ron said. Grief makes people sad. Or angry. You're not either of those things. You're cold. You're calculating. It's like you've turned something off. I haven't turned anything off, Harry said. You haven't been to Quidditch practice in 3 weeks, Ron said. I've been busy, Harry said. With what? Ron said. Training, Harry said. What kind of training requires you to skip Quidditch, read in the library at 3 a.m, and sit in rooms watching people like you're planning something? Harry met Ron's eyes. Ron held them. Ron was not Hermione. He didn't have the analytical framework or the research instinct. But Ron had something else. The ability to see a person clearly, without the filters that intelligence and analysis sometimes created. Something's wrong, Ron said. I don't know what it is. Hermione probably does, she knows everything. But I know something's wrong because you're my best mate and you've been my best mate for 6 years, and the person sitting in that chair is not the person who walked into the compartment on the Hogwarts Express. Harry said nothing. When you're ready to tell me, Ron said. I'll be here. He went upstairs. Harry sat in the common room in the stillness that Ron had noticed, and that Harry was beginning to notice too, the quality of occupied silence, of a mind running calculations that didn't stop. He went to the library. The Grimmauld Place books under the ward in his trunk were calling. He didn't think about the word calling. He should have. December. The escalation. The reflective inversion had been the beginning. By December, Harry had added 4 more dark combat spells to his working repertoire, practiced in the room of requirement at hours when nobody else was using it. Vulnera Serpentia. The Cutting Curse. Precise, controllable, devastating against physical targets. Obscura Maledictum. A blinding hex that worked on the target's magical perception rather than their physical eyes, rendering them unable to see incoming spells even if their eyesight was untouched. Vincula Mortis, a binding spell that didn't just restrain movement but suppressed the target's ability to cast. Dark magic's answer to Expelliarmus, instead of disarming the wand. It disabled the wizard. And the reflective inversion, which he'd refined and practiced until he could cast it non-verbally, instantly, with a precision that would have made Snape's eyebrows reach his hairline. He was also studying theory that went beyond combat. Ward theory. Enchantment architecture. The principles of blood magic. Not the practice. Not yet. Just the principles. The understanding of how magical power could be channeled through biological connection. How the bonds between people could be used as conduits for protective or aggressive magic. The blood magic research was what led him to understand his mother's sacrifice. Lily Potter's protection. The magic that had saved Harry as a baby, that had lived in his skin and burned Voldemort's touch, was blood magic. Not dark blood magic, not in the sense that Voldemort's resurrection ritual had been dark, but blood magic nonetheless. The most powerful piece of protective magic Harry had ever been touched by was from a discipline that the Ministry classified alongside curses and hexes. This confirmed something Harry had been suspecting. The classification system was not about what was dangerous, it was about what was powerful. The Ministry classified things as dark when they were effective enough to threaten the existing power structure. The Patronus wasn't classified as dark, not because it wasn't powerful, but because it couldn't be used offensively. The moment a piece of magic could shift the balance of power, it went on the list. That's not entirely wrong, Hermione said, when he told her this. She had been doing her own research, as promised, and she had found things that made her uncomfortable. Tell me, Harry said. The classification system has issues, she said. I'll give you that. There are spells classified as dark that are essentially neutral. Their classification is political rather than functional. The reflective inversion you used is a good example. It's a defensive spell. The Ministry classified it because it can cause more harm to the attacker than the attacker intended, which the Ministry considers disproportionate force. So the Ministry is deciding how much force is appropriate in self-defense, Harry said. Yes, Hermione said. And I can see why that bothers you. It bothers me too. But, Harry said. But the classification exists for a reason beyond politics, she said. I've read the research, Harry, the long-term effects of dark magic practice on the caster. The actual studies, not the propaganda. The ones done by the Department of Mysteries in the 1970s, before the First War. What did they find? Emotional blunting, she said. Graduated, progressive. The more dark magic a person practices, the less they feel. The emotions powering the casting got stronger. The intent emotions. Anger, fear, the desire to control. Those get amplified. But everything else, compassion, guilt, uncertainty, love, those decrease. Decrease by how much? Harry said. Depends on frequency and intensity of practice, she said. The studies showed measurable changes after as little as 3 months of regular dark casting. 3 months, Harry said. You've been practicing since August, Hermione said. The air changed. I haven't noticed any change, Harry said. That's the point, Hermione said. The blunting is progressive and self-concealing. You don't notice the reduction in empathy because the reduction includes the capacity to be concerned about the reduction. Harry sat with this. You're telling me I'm already affected, he said. I'm telling you you might be, she said. I'm telling you that the research suggests it's possible and that the timeline matches. And you want me to stop, he said. I want you to consider that what you're doing might be changing you in ways you can't perceive, she said. That the reason you feel fine about this is not that you are fine, it's that the practice is removing your ability to feel not fine about it. That's a circular argument, Harry said. You're saying the evidence that I'm affected is that I don't think I'm affected. I'm saying that the absence of concern is itself a symptom, she said. So there's no way for me to demonstrate that I'm all right, Harry said. Because any demonstration of being all right is, by your logic, evidence that I'm not. She stopped. That's actually a fair point. Yes, Harry said. It is. She looked at him with the expression of someone who has been out-argued and knows it and is not willing to concede because the stakes are too high for concession. I'm watching you, she said. Ron and I both. We're watching. I know, Harry said. If we see something, you'll tell me, Harry said. I know. We'll do more than tell you, she said. He heard the warning. He filed it. He went back to studying. January. The thing that happened with the Carrow girl. There was a 7th year Slytherin named Alecto Carrow's niece, or cousin, or some other configuration of the Carrow family that Harry hadn't fully mapped. Her name was Eris, and she had been, since September, making life difficult for a 2nd year Muggle-born named Thomas Avery. The bullying was the standard Slytherin variety: hexes in corridors, insults about blood status, the cruelties of someone who believed in hierarchy and who was using a child to practice it. The teachers were managing it inadequately. McGonagall had intervened twice. The behaviour continued. In January, Harry walked past a corridor and heard the 2nd year crying. He found Eris Carrow standing over Thomas Avery with her wand out. The boy was on the floor. His face was swelling from something that was not a standard hex. Move along, Potter, Eris said. She was 17, tall, and had the particular confidence of someone who had been raised to believe that blood status gave her the right to hurt people. Harry looked at Thomas Avery on the floor, at the swelling, which was magical, which was the result of a hex that was designed to cause pain and humiliation simultaneously, at the tears. He looked at Eris. Leave him alone, Harry said. Or what? She said. Going to stun me? Report me? Go ahead. McGonagall gave me a week's detention last time. I spent it cleaning trophies. Harry looked at her wand hand, at the stance, the confidence, the complete absence of concern about consequences. He didn't cast Stupefy. He cast Vincula Mortis. The binding spell hit Eris Carrow in the chest, and her magic went out like a candle. She staggered. The sensation of losing magical capacity was physically disorienting, like having a sense amputated, and her wand hand went limp and her face went from confident to terrified in about 1 second. What did you? She started. It'll wear off in an hour, Harry said. His voice was level. Controlled? The voice that Ron had noticed and identified as different. If I find out you've touched that boy again, I'll make it permanent. He couldn't make it permanent. The Vincula Mortis was temporary by design, but she didn't know that. Eris Carrow looked at him with genuine fear. The fear of someone who has just had their magic suppressed and who does not know what else the person in front of them can do. She left. Harry helped Thomas Avery up. The boy was crying less, partly because the immediate threat was gone and partly because he was 11 and had just watched Harry Potter do something to a 7th year that the 7th year clearly hadn't expected. Are you all right? Harry said. Yeah, Thomas said. What did you do to her? I made her stop, Harry said. How? Don't worry about it, Harry said. Go to the hospital wing. Tell Madame Pomfrey it was a hex. Thomas went. Harry stood in the corridor and assessed what he felt. He felt good. He felt the clean satisfaction of having solved a problem that the teachers hadn't solved, using tools that the teachers didn't have. He had protected someone. He had been effective. He also felt, underneath the satisfaction, something that he chose not to examine: the absence of doubt. He had cast a dark spell on another student and had not hesitated, had not considered alternatives, had gone directly to the dark option because it was the most effective option available. He had not tried stupefy first. He had not tried talking. He had not tried the normal things that Harry Potter, the Harry Potter of 5 months ago, would have tried before reaching for the dark. The normal responses were still available to him. He knew this. He could feel them, like furniture in a room he was choosing not to enter. But they were further away than they had been. The distance was growing. He went to lunch. He ate. He did not think about the distance. The confrontation with Dumbledore. Dumbledore found out about the Carrow incident within the day, because Dumbledore found out about everything within the day and called Harry to his office that evening. Vincula mortis, Dumbledore said. Harry didn't deny it. On a fellow student, Dumbledore said. She was attacking a second year, Harry said. There are channels for addressing bullying, Dumbledore said. Channels that do not involve dark magic. The channels weren't working, Harry said. McGonagall had intervened twice. The behaviour continued. And your response was to suppress another student's magic, Dumbledore said. My response was to stop the attack immediately, Harry said. Dumbledore looked at him. The blue eyes, assessing, Harry held the gaze with the occlumency skills he'd been developing all year. Harry, Dumbledore said, I'm going to ask you something and I need you to answer honestly. Yes? What else have you been practicing? Harry considered his options. Dumbledore already knew about the vincula mortis. Snape had likely told him about the reflective inversion. The question was how much to reveal. Several combat spells, Harry said, from books I found at Grimmauld Place. The Black Family Library, Dumbledore said. He closed his eyes briefly. I should have cleared that library years ago. Then I wouldn't have learned anything, Harry said. That, Dumbledore said, is precisely my concern. He stood up and walked to the window. The grounds were dark outside. The lake reflected the half moon. I made a mistake with Tom Riddle, Dumbledore said. I saw a talented, hungry young man, and I assumed that providing him with a safe environment would be sufficient to steer him away from the dark arts. It was not sufficient. The hunger was deeper than the environment. I'm not Tom Riddle, Harry said. No, Dumbledore said. You're not. Tom was fascinated by power for its own sake. You're fascinated by effectiveness. You want to be better at fighting because you're afraid of losing the people you love. He turned from the window. That motivation is nobler. But the destination is the same. The destination is not the same, Harry said. I'm not trying to live forever. I'm not splitting my soul. I'm learning combat magic so that when I face Voldemort, I have a chance. The reflective inversion, Dumbledore said. The vincula mortis. Vulnera serpentia, I expect. Possibly others. Harry said nothing. These are not minor spells, Dumbledore said. These are spells that require deep intent. Spells that, by their nature, train the emotional musculature of the caster towards specific orientations. You've been practicing them for months. I know the research, Harry said. Hermione showed me. And? Dumbledore said. And I haven't noticed any change, Harry said. Dumbledore looked at him with genuine sadness. Harry, he said. The last person who told me that was Gellert Grindelwald. The comparison landed. Harry felt it. Not the impact of being compared to a dark wizard, but the colder impact of being compared to someone who had said the same words and been wrong. What are you asking me to do? Harry said. I'm asking you to stop, Dumbledore said. I can't stop, Harry said. Can't, Dumbledore said, or won't. Harry thought about this, genuinely thought about it, which was something the Hermione research had made him aware he needed to do, genuinely examine whether his decision was voluntary. Won't, he said. Because the alternative is going into the fight with Voldemort using school-level magic against someone who has spent 50 years mastering the dark arts. The alternative is losing. The alternative is fighting differently, Dumbledore said, with different tools. With the tools I can teach you. What tools? Harry said. The disarming charm? Love, Dumbledore said. Harry stared at him. You're telling me that my weapon against Voldemort is love, Harry said. I'm telling you that the magic your mother used to save you, the magic that still protects you, is the most powerful magic I have ever encountered, Dumbledore said. And it is not dark. It's also not repeatable, Harry said. She died to do it. That's the mechanism. Self-sacrifice. Which means the only way I can use the same magic is to die. Not necessarily, Dumbledore said. What else? Harry said. What other magic is as effective as what I've been learning? Show me the light side equivalent. Show me the defensive magic that's as good as the reflective inversion, the binding spell that's as complete as the vincula mortis. If there's a clean version of what I've been doing, I'll learn it instead. Dumbledore was quiet. There isn't one, Harry said. Is there? There isn't a clean version, Harry said. The dark arts are better at combat because they were designed for combat. The light doesn't have equivalents because the light was designed for safety, not for fighting. You know this. You've always known this. I know, Dumbledore said very quietly, that the temptation to believe the dark arts are necessary is itself one of the most dangerous effects of studying them. Harry looked at him. Is it a temptation? Harry said. Or is it accurate? Dumbledore didn't answer. Harry left the office. In the corridor, he leaned against the wall and pressed his forehead to the stone and tried to identify what he was feeling. He was frustrated. He was angry. He was right. He knew he was right. He could feel the rightness of his position, how you feel solid ground under your feet. And underneath the rightness, buried deep enough that he almost missed it, he was less bothered by the conversation than he should have been. A year ago, Dumbledore's concern would have shaken him. A year ago, being compared to Grindelwald would have been devastating. Today, it was data. He filed it. He went to the room of requirement. He practiced. February. The Ginny problem. Ginny Weasley was the person Harry least wanted to notice what was happening, which meant she was, naturally, the person who noticed it most clearly. Not because Ginny was more observant than Hermione. She wasn't. Hermione's analytical capability was unmatched. But Ginny had something Hermione didn't. Experience with the dark arts from the inside. She had been possessed by Tom Riddle's diary for a year. She knew what dark magic felt like when it was working on you. She knew the texture of it. You feel different, Ginny said in the common room in February. Different how? Harry said. When you're near me, Ginny said. Something about your magic feels sharp, like standing next to a fire that's burning hotter than it should. Harry looked at her. Ginny was looking back with an expression he hadn't seen before. Not fear exactly, but recognition. The recognition of someone encountering something they'd encountered before. The diary felt like that, Ginny said. Not the same. Not Voldemort. But the same. Category, the same type of magical signature. I'm not possessed, Harry said. I know, Ginny said. Possession feels different. This is like you're choosing to carry something that's changing your output. Your magical signature has shifted. You can read magical signatures? Harry said. Since the diary, Ginny said. I've been sensitive to dark magic ever since. It's like having been burned makes you feel heat differently. I can tell when someone's been practicing. She looked at him steadily. You've been practicing. Harry met her eyes. Ginny, who was 15, who was fierce and funny, and who had survived something at 12 that would have broken most people. Ginny, who knew what the dark arts tasted like because they had been fed to her without her consent. Yes, he said. How much? She said. Enough that Dumbledore is concerned, he said. Are you concerned? She said. No, he said. That concerns me, she said. I know, he said. She sat down next to him. Close, the proximity was. Harry registered it without the response he would have had 6 months ago. 6 months ago, Ginny sitting this close would have produced a specific set of reactions: accelerated heartbeat, heightened awareness, the electric quality of attraction. Now it produced awareness without the electricity. He noticed this. He noticed that he noticed it without being alarmed by it. The diary took things from me, Ginny said. When Tom was in my head, he took warmth, the ability to enjoy small things. It took me 2 years to get that back. 2 years of feeling like the colour had been drained out of everything. I haven't been possessed, Harry said. You don't have to be possessed, Ginny said. You just have to practice. The magic itself does the same thing, just slower. It takes the warmth out. I still have warmth, Harry said. Do you? She said. When was the last time you laughed? Harry thought about this. He couldn't remember. When was the last time you felt happy about something that wasn't magic? Ginny said. When was the last time you enjoyed a meal, or a Quidditch game, or a conversation with Ron about nothing? He couldn't remember that either. I've been busy, he said. You've been changing, she said. And the change looks like, Harry, it looks like the early stages of what Tom did to me. The narrowing, the focus, everything that isn't the magic starts to lose significance. The magic is what's going to keep me alive, Harry said. And what good is staying alive if you're not you when you do it? She said. He looked at her. She was looking at him with the directness that was the most Ginny quality in the world, the complete absence of pretense, the refusal to manage a situation that needed to be stated plainly. I hear you, he said. Do you? She said. I hear you, he said again. I'm not going to stop. But I hear you. She held his gaze for a moment. Harry, she said, I've been inside the dark arts. I've had them inside me. I know what they do. And I know what the early stages look like because I lived them. You're in the early stages. Early stages of what? Of becoming someone who can only feel one thing at a time, she said. And the one thing is the magic. He got up and left. Harry sat in the common room and tested what she'd said against his own experience. He couldn't feel the loss. That was what the book had warned about. That was what Hermione's research had described. The reduction in emotional range was self-concealing. You couldn't feel the absence of feelings you no longer had. But he could see the evidence. The absence of laughter. The absence of enjoyment. The narrowing of his experience to magic and strategy and the pursuit of effectiveness. He could see it. He chose not to act on it. This was the moment, the hinge moment, the point at which Harry Potter had the information and the opportunity to change direction and chose not to. He wasn't corrupted. Not because the dark arts had seized his mind, because the logic still held, because the calculations still added up, because the cost of stopping was still, in his assessment, greater than the cost of continuing. He was wrong about this, but he wouldn't know it for months. Let us know what you'd like to see next. March, the Draco problem. Draco Malfoy was having a terrible year, and Harry could see it. This was new. In previous years, Harry's observation of Draco had been adversarial, watching an enemy for signs of hostile intent, the competitive surveillance of two people who had decided in first year that they were opposites. But the dark arts study had given Harry a different lens. He could read magical signatures now, faintly, in as Ginny had described. And Draco's signature was wrong. It was stressed, compressed, the magical equivalent of someone holding their breath for months. Harry followed Draco. Strategically, with the Marauder's map and the planning discipline that his combat studies had drilled into him. He tracked Draco's movements for 2 weeks and identified the pattern, the room of requirement, most evenings, for hours. Something was in there that Draco was working on. Harry knew what it was. Dumbledore had told him, in the Horcrux lessons, about the Vanishing Cabinet. About Draco's assignment, kill Dumbledore, or Voldemort would kill Draco's family. Harry knew the whole picture. The old Harry would have told someone. Gone to Dumbledore, reported the threat, let the authorities handle it. This Harry did something different. He went to Draco. "I know about the cabinet," Harry said. "They were in the 6th floor corridor near the bathroom where Moaning Myrtle lived." Harry had timed the encounter for when Draco was alone, which was most of the time now. Crabbe and Goyle had been reassigned by whatever internal logic governed Slytherin loyalty, and Draco was operating without backup. Draco's wand came up. "Stay away from me, Potter. I know about the mission," Harry said. "Kill Dumbledore or your family dies." Draco's face went white. The wand arm shook. "How?" Draco started. "It doesn't matter how," Harry said. "What matters is that you can't do it. You've been trying all year and you can't. The cabinet isn't working properly, and even if it were, you're not a killer." "You don't know what I am," Draco said. "I know exactly what you are," Harry said. "You're 16 years old and you're terrified and you're trying to save your parents by doing something that's going to destroy you." Draco stared at him. The wand arm dropped slightly. "I can help," Harry said. "You can't. I can protect your family," Harry said. "I'm learning things. Magic that. Dumbledore has limits. Snape has limits. I'm operating outside those limits." "What are you talking about?" Draco said. "Blood wards," Harry said. "Protective enchantments that are beyond what the Order uses. The kind of magic your family's library probably has, but that your mother never taught you because it's dark," Draco said. "Effective," Harry said. Draco looked at him with an expression Harry had never seen on his face before, the expression of someone recalibrating a long-held assumption. Harry Potter, who was supposed to be the champion of the light, standing in a corridor talking about dark protective magic with the comfort of someone who had been studying it for months. "You've gone dark," Draco said, not as an accusation, as a diagnosis. "I've gone practical," Harry said. "That's what they all say," Draco said. "My aunt said that. My father said that. Every Death Eater in the history of Death Eaters said they were being practical." "I'm not a Death Eater," Harry said. "No," Draco said. "You're something worse. You're someone who thinks they can use the same tools without becoming the same person." Harry looked at Draco Malfoy, who was, at this moment, more honest with him than anyone had been in months. Because Draco knew the dark arts from the inside, not as a student, but as someone raised in them, marinated in them, shaped by the specific culture of a family that had treated dark magic as heritage. "Can I?" Harry said. "Can you what?" Draco said. "Use the tools without becoming the person," Harry said. Draco looked at him for a long time. "My father thought he could," Draco said. "He thought he was using Voldemort, managing the relationship, keeping the family safe while maintaining access to the power. He's in Azkaban now. Voldemort uses him as an example of what happens to people who think they can manage the relationship." "I'm not your father," Harry said. No, Draco said. You're smarter than my father. Which makes you more dangerous, not less. The conversation didn't resolve. Harry offered protection for the Malfoys. Draco didn't accept, didn't reject. He occupied the middle ground of someone who had been presented with an option he hadn't expected and who needed time to process it. Harry went back to his training. The conversation stayed with him. The moment when Draco had said, "You're something worse." The casual accuracy of it, the recognition from someone who knew of what Harry was becoming. He filed it. He didn't act on it. The filing was getting thicker. April, the spell that crossed the line. It happened in the bathroom. The same bathroom, Moaning Myrtles, because the universe had a taste for symmetry that bordered on cruelty. Harry had been tracking Draco. To monitor, not to confront. The vanishing cabinet was still a threat, and Harry's offer of protection had not been accepted, and the timeline was moving toward whatever Voldemort had planned. He found Draco in the bathroom, crying. Draco was at the sinks, hands gripping the porcelain, and the sound he was making was raw and broken in a way that Harry recognized because he'd made similar sounds in the cupboard under the stairs and in the tent in the forest and in the bathroom at the Dursleys after his worst dreams. The sound of someone at the end of what they could hold. Harry made a noise, a footstep, something. Draco looked up. His face was wet and his eyes were red and his wand was in his hand before the crying had stopped. "Get out," Draco said. "Draco," I said, "get out." And then Draco cast. At the wall beside Harry, a blasting curse that shattered porcelain and sent fragments across the room. It was the cast of someone whose emotions had exceeded their control, not targeted, not strategic, just the explosive release of too much pressure. Harry's response was instant. He didn't think. He didn't choose. The months of practice had built pathways that bypassed conscious decision. His wand came up, and his body moved, and the spell that came out of his mouth was not stupefy, not expelliarmus, not any of the standard responses that Professor Lupin had taught him in third year, or that Dumbledore had demonstrated in the office, or that 6 years of Hogwarts education had ingrained. It was Sectum Sempra, a version older and more dangerous than the one in Snape's textbook. The version Harry had found in the Black Library, which was older, more powerful, and designed for combat rather than defense. The version that opened wounds that didn't close naturally. The spell hit Draco across the chest. Blood. Immediate. Shocking. Too much. Draco went down, and the blood spread across the bathroom floor and mixed with the water from the broken sinks, and Harry stood there with his wand out, and the dark combat reflexes still firing, and the cold clarity still present, and underneath the clarity surfacing for the first time in weeks. Horror. Horror. He was feeling horror. It broke through the blunting like water through ice, the overwhelming physical horror of what he'd done. He'd attacked someone who was crying. He'd used dark magic on a person who was unarmed in any meaningful sense, whose blasting curse had hit a wall, who had not been aiming at Harry, who had been a frightened 16-year-old crying in a bathroom. "Help," Harry said. Not to anyone present, just the word falling out of him. "Help." Snape came through the door. Snape looked at the scene. Harry standing, Draco on the floor, the blood, the shattered porcelain, and his face did something that Harry had never seen on it. Not anger, not contempt. Grief, a flash of it, there and gone. The grief of someone seeing a pattern repeat. Snape went to Draco. The healing incantation was immediate. Vulnera Saninter, the counter to Sectum Sempra, sung rather than spoken, the one tracing the wounds. The blood slowed. The cuts began to close. Draco was unconscious. The floor was red. Snape looked up at Harry. "Get out," Snape said. Harry didn't move. "Get out of this bathroom, Potter," Snape said, and his voice was not the voice of anger. It was the voice of someone who was looking at exactly the thing he had been afraid of seeing, and who was managing the fear through professional competence. Harry left. He walked through the corridors of Hogwarts with blood on his shoes and his hands shaking, and the horror still breaking through the ice, still flooding the spaces that the blunting had emptied. And the horror was enormous and total, and it was, he understood, the first genuine emotion he'd felt in months that wasn't connected to magic. He went to the room of requirement. He sat on the floor. He looked at his wand. The one that had cast Sectum Semper on a crying boy. He threw up. After, sitting on the floor with the taste of bile in his mouth and the blood drying on his shoes, he tried to assess what had happened. The dark combat reflexes had fired automatically. The intent pathways, the ones he'd been training for months, the deep intent channels that dark magic required, had activated before conscious thought could intervene. He had not chosen to cast Sectum Sempra. His training had chosen it for him. This was what the book had meant about practice changing the caster. This was what Hermione's research had described. This was what Ginny had warned about. The pathways were stronger than his will. He sat on the floor of the room of requirement and understood, for the first time, that he was in trouble. Snape came for him an hour later. Harry had moved from the room of requirement, was in the corridor near the astronomy tower, sitting against the wall. Snape found him there. "Draco will survive," Snape said. "The wounds are healing. Madame Pomfrey is monitoring." Harry said nothing. "The spell you used," Snape said. "It was not the version from my book." "No," Harry said. "It was the older version," Snape said. "The one from the Black Library." "Yes," Harry said. "I invented Sectum Sempra when I was 15, Snape said. "I based it on an older spell that I found in a similar source. The spell I created was a moderated version, controlled, designed for precision rather than devastation." He paused. "The version you used was the original, unmoderated, built for killing, not cutting." "I didn't mean to, that is precisely the problem," Snape said. "You didn't mean to. The spell cast itself. The pathways you've been building activated without your permission." Harry looked at the floor. "I told you," Snape said. "The road feels shorter on the way in." "I know," Harry said. "Do you?" Snape said. "Because I walked this road. I stood where you're standing. I was 16 and I was angry and I was brilliant with the dark arts, and I used them on someone who didn't deserve it, and the someone never forgave me." Harry looked up. "Your mother," Snape said. And the saying of it cost him something visible, the microflinch, the tightening around the eyes, the specific quality of a wound that had never fully healed. "She? I called her something unforgivable, because the dark magic I'd been practicing had narrowed my emotional range until the only feelings I could reliably access were anger and contempt. And I lost her." Permanently, Harry stared at him. Snape had never, in 6 years of mutual antagonism, in hundreds of classes and confrontations, spoken about Lily Potter to Harry. "Never, the dark arts didn't make me say it," Snape said. "I want to be clear about that. The choice was mine. But the dark arts had spent 4 years reducing the emotional options available to me until the thing I said was the most natural response to the pain I was feeling. They hadn't taken my ability to choose. They'd limited what I could choose from. And you came back," Harry said. "I came back," Snape said. "It took years. It cost me. Everything I'd built. Every relationship except the one I had with Dumbledore, which survived because Dumbledore has a capacity for tolerating failure that I have never encountered in anyone else." "How?" Harry said. "How did I come back?" Snape said. "How do you come back from having the pathways, from the training?" "The book says the changes are progressive. The book is not wrong," Snape said. "The changes are progressive. But they are not irreversible. Not at your stage." You've been practicing for 8 months? 9? Since July, Harry said. 9 months, Snape said. That's long enough for significant blunting. Not long enough for structural change. The emotional range you've lost can be recovered. How? Harry said again. By stopping, Snape said. By not casting dark magic for a sustained period. The pathways atrophy without use. The emotional range returns slowly as the brain rebuilds the connections that the practice suppressed. How long? Harry said. Months, Snape said. Possibly a year. Depending on intensity of practice and individual, I don't have a year, Harry said. Voldemort, Snape said, is my problem. And Dumbledore's. And the Order's. He is not your problem alone. The prophecy says you have to face him, Snape said. It does not say you have to face him with dark magic. It does not say you have to face him as a diminished version of yourself. It says neither can live while the other survives. He looked at Harry. You survive Voldemort at age 1 with no magic at all. With love. With your mother's sacrifice. The prophecy does not require power. It requires you. Harry sat against the wall and felt the horror still pressing through the ice. The horror of what he'd done to Draco. The horror of what he'd become. The horror of looking at 9 months of careful, deliberate, strategic self-destruction and seeing it clearly for the first time because the one emotion the dark arts hadn't suppressed was the one that was strongest. The horror of hurting someone who didn't deserve it. I need to stop, Harry said. Yes, Snape said. I don't know if I can, Harry said. The fact that you're uncertain is a good sign, Snape said. If you were certain you could stop, you would already be beyond the point of stopping. That's not reassuring, Harry said. I'm not here to reassure you, Snape said. I'm here because I am the only person in this school who has walked this road and come back, and because, whatever I feel about you personally, Potter, I will not watch Lily's son go where I went. Harry looked at him, at Severus Snape, who had hated him for 6 years, who was standing in a corridor at midnight telling him the truth about the worst mistake of his own life, because Harry's mother's eyes were looking at him from Harry's face. Okay, Harry said. What do I do? Give me the books. Snape said. All of them. Everything from the Black Library. I'll confiscate them. And you stop casting. Snape said. Tonight, no more dark magic. No practice, no study, no theoretical engagement. Clean break. Cold turkey, Harry said. The Muggle phrase is adequate, Snape said. What about Voldemort? Harry said. What about the fight? I will train you, Snape said. Not in dark magic. In the magic I use, which is considerable, and which operates in the territory between dark and light that Dumbledore prefers to pretend doesn't exist. Defensive magic that is aggressive without being corrosive. Combat magic that does not require the deep intent that damages the caster. Grey magic, Harry said. I don't use labels, Snape said. I use what works without destroying the user, which is more than you've been doing. Harry looked at his wand. At the holly wand that had cast Sectum Sempra on a crying boy in a bathroom. The wand hadn't changed. The wand was the same as it had always been. The person holding it had changed. Okay, Harry said. He gave Snape the books the next morning. 3 volumes from the Black Library, wrapped in their Notice Me Not charm, handed over in Snape's office at 7 in the morning while the castle was still waking. Snape took them without ceremony. He put them in a warded cabinet and locked it with a spell Harry didn't recognize. We begin tomorrow, Snape said. Evenings, after dinner. What about my other commitments are my concern, Snape said. Yours is being in my office at 8 o'clock. Harry left. He walked through the castle, bookless, directionless, with the specific unsettled quality of someone who has just given up the thing that had been the center of their life for 9 months and who doesn't know what's left. The withdrawal. Hermione's research had described the effects of dark magic cessation. Harry had read it at the time and dismissed it as theoretical. Living it was different. The first week was physical. His hands shook. A fine tremor, visible when he held his wand steady, manageable in class but noticeable. The magic that had been flowing through him in the deep, intent pattern, the intimate, connected, part of him flow, was absent, and the standard magic that replaced it felt wrong. Flat, like drinking water after months of wine. The second week was emotional. The blunting that had been suppressing his emotional range began to recede, and the emotions that had been held back came forward, not gradually but in bursts. Grief for Sirius, which he had not properly felt since August. Guilt about Draco, which was enormous and specific and which arrived at inconvenient moments. Shame, which was new, which he had not felt in months, which was the emotion most thoroughly suppressed by dark practice, and which returned with the force of something that had been compressed. He cried in the dormitory at 3 a.m, silently, with his face in the pillow. And the crying was unfamiliar in how exercise was unfamiliar after months of inactivity. The muscles of it had atrophied, and the using of them hurt. Ron heard him. Ron was in the next bed, and Ron heard everything, because Ron was Ron. "Harry," Ron said, in the dark. "I'm fine," Harry said. "Yeah, that's clearly not true," Ron said. He got up and came over and sat on the edge of Harry's bed. "What happened?" "I stopped," Harry said. The dark stuff. I stopped." Ron absorbed this. "Good," Ron said. "It doesn't feel good," Harry said. "No," Ron said. "I imagine it doesn't." "I hurt Draco," Harry said, in the bathroom. "The Sectum Sempra. Ron, I nearly killed him." "I heard," Ron said. "The whole school heard." "He was crying," Harry said. "He was standing there crying, and the spell came out before I know," Ron said. "How can you—" Harry stopped. "How can you be sitting here? I could have killed someone. I've been studying things that—" "Yeah," Ron said. "I know. You knew?" "I've known for months," Ron said. "Since October. Since the thing Snape noticed in defense class." "You knew and you didn't say anything?" "I said something," Ron said. "I said you were sitting like Snape. I said something was different. You didn't listen." Harry was quiet. "Here's the thing, mate," Ron said. "I'm not Hermione. I can't research the magical theory of what you're doing. I'm not Dumbledore. I can't give you a wise speech about the nature of power. I'm not Snape. I can't tell you what the road looks like because I've walked it." He paused. "I'm Ron. What I can do is sit here at 3 a.m. and be here. That's—" Harry started. "It's what I've got," Ron said. "Take it or don't." Harry looked at his best friend in the dark, at Ron Weasley, who was not the most powerful wizard or the most intelligent or the most insightful, who was sometimes insecure and sometimes jealous, and who had once left them in a tent because the darkness got too heavy, who was also, had always been, the most reliably present person in Harry's life. "Thank you," Harry said. "Don't mention it," Ron said. "Literally, never mention this to anyone." "Deal," Harry said. Ron went back to his bed. Harry lay in the dark and felt the emotions continuing to surface. Grief, guilt, shame, fear, love. The entire range that had been suppressed returning with the disorienting intensity of colour after months of grey. He didn't sleep. But the not sleeping felt different from the dark study not sleeping of the previous months. It was the not sleeping of someone who was feeling too much rather than too little. It was better. It was considerably worse. It was alive. Snape's lessons. The training was unlike anything Harry had experienced. Too individual for a Hogwarts class, too physical for a pensieve session, too disciplined for dark arts study. too controlled, the opposite of the deep, intent wildness that dark magic required. Snape taught Harry magic that existed in the space between light and dark. The Patronus, Snape said in the first lesson, is the antithesis of everything you've been practicing. I can cast a Patronus, Harry said. I've been able to since third year. You can cast a Patronus against Dementors, Snape said. Can you cast one in combat, under pressure? While someone is trying to kill you? I don't know, Harry said. Then we find out, Snape said. The Patronus, Snape explained, was the perfect counter to dark magic, not just to Dementors, but to dark casting in general. The Patronus was powered by positive emotion, by love and happiness, and the specific quality of joy that dark magic could not touch. A Patronus projected in combat acted as a shield against dark curses, in a way that standard shield charms couldn't. The dark arts work through intent, Snape said, through the emotional investment of the caster. The Patronus disrupts that investment. A dark curse that encounters a Patronus is not blocked, it is unmade. The positive emotion at the core of the Patronus is incompatible with the negative emotion that powers the curse. So the Patronus is an anti-dark weapon, Harry said. The Patronus is the anti-dark weapon, Snape said. It is why the Patronus is taught as early as third year in some traditions. It is why the ability to cast a corporeal Patronus is the single most important combat skill a wizard can possess against a dark opponent. Nobody taught me this, Harry said. Lupin taught you the Patronus against Dementors, Snape said. The combat application is more advanced and more dangerous in its own way. How is a Patronus dangerous? Because a combat Patronus requires the caster to maintain positive emotion under extreme duress, Snape said. In battle. While being attacked. While in pain. While watching people they love being hurt. The emotional requirement is comparable to deep intent dark casting, but in the opposite direction. You have to hold on to happiness while everything around you is trying to destroy it, Harry said. Yes, Snape said, which is considerably harder than holding on to anger. Can you cast one? Harry said. Snape looked at him. Something moved behind the mask. Yes, Snape said. What form does it take? Harry said. That is not relevant to your training, Snape said. I know what form it takes, Harry said. The silence between them was loaded. Then, you know, Snape said, that the Patronus requires something specific from the caster. Something real. Something that the caster would not trade for any amount of power. He looked at Harry. When you were practicing the dark arts, could you have cast a Patronus? Harry thought about it. Actually thought about it. Reached for the memory he used, the happiness, the positive emotion that had always powered the stag. The memory was there. The emotion behind it was dimmer, reduced. The blunting had not eliminated it, but had compressed it, pushed it into a smaller space. Probably not, Harry said. That, Snape said, is what you lost. Not power. Not capability. The ability to feel the thing that powers your greatest strength. The training continued for months. Snape was relentless, demanding, and completely without warmth, which was the only kind of teaching that Harry could have received at this point without experiencing it as pity. Snape didn't pity him. Snape understood him. From the inside, from the specific and personal experience of having been the same kind of fool at the same kind of age. Harry relearned his magic. The foundations were there, the core abilities undiminished. But the relationship between Harry and his magic had to be rebuilt. The deep intent pathways that dark practice had carved into his casting had to be allowed to atrophy, while new pathways, or rather, the old pathways, the standard ones, the ones that connected magic to the full range of human emotion rather than just the dark subset, were restored. It was slow. It was humbling. It was the hardest thing Harry had done in his life, which was saying something given that his life included a basilisk, a dragon, and a prophecy. By May, his Patronus was back to full strength. By June, the tremor in his hands was gone. By July, sitting at the Weasley table at the Burrow, eating Molly's cooking, listening to Fred and George argue about something product-related, he felt something he hadn't felt in months. He felt happy, not the clear, sharp, focused happiness of dark magic, the warm, messy, imprecise happiness of being surrounded by people who loved him and whom he loved back. The kind that didn't have an edge. The kind that wasn't useful for anything except making life worth living. He ate his potatoes. He laughed at Fred's joke. He looked at Ron across the table and Ron looked back, and Ron grinned. "There you are," Ron said. "What?" Harry said. "You," Ron said. "You're back." Harry looked at his plate, at the food, the table, the family. He was back. The 9 months of dark practice had left marks that the recovery hadn't erased. He was more guarded than he'd been before, more aware of the distance between impulse and action, more conscious of the choices he was making, because he'd seen what happened when the choices were made for him by training he couldn't control. But he was back. The emotional range was returning, the warmth was returning. The things that Ginny had warned about, the narrowing, the loss of small pleasures, were reversing. "Yeah," Harry said. "I think I am." Year 7. The war. The war came regardless of Harry's personal journey, because Voldemort did not wait for Harry Potter to finish his character development before attacking. Dumbledore died. Harry's intervention with Draco had changed the Astronomy Tower configuration, but particular configuration. But the ring Horcrux's destruction had been a complicated business, and the cursed vault at Gringotts had been worse. And in the midst of the Horcrux hunt, Dumbledore had taken a curse that was not the ring's withering hand, but was, in its own way, equally fatal. Dumbledore died in December of Harry's 7th year, in his office, sitting in his chair, with Snape and Harry and McGonagall present. It was not dramatic. It was quiet. An old man, at the end of a long life, dying of accumulated magical damage. "The Horcruxes," Dumbledore said near the end. "The locket, the cup, the diadem, the snake." His voice was thin. "And you, Harry." "I know," Harry said. "You know what that means," Dumbledore said. "I know," Harry said. "The forest," Dumbledore said. "I know," Harry said. Dumbledore looked at him with the blue eyes that were dimming. "You came back from the dark," he said. "That is rare. I want you to know that is the bravest thing I've seen in a very long life." "I didn't do it alone," Harry said. "No," Dumbledore said. "You didn't." "That's the point. That's the whole point. He died." Harry sat in the office after they took the body. He sat in the chair across from the empty desk and looked at the portraits, which were weeping, and at Fawkes, who was singing the morning song, and he felt the grief clearly and completely, without blunting, without management, the full force of losing someone who had mattered enormously. It hurt. It was supposed to hurt. That was what Ginny had tried to tell him, that the hurting was the proof of the feeling, and that the feeling was the proof of being alive. He went to the war. The hunt. The Horcrux hunt proceeded without Dumbledore, but not without his preparation. Harry, Ron, and Hermione, the three of them, together, the way it was always meant to be, went after the remaining Horcruxes, with the information Dumbledore had assembled, and with the skills that a year of crisis had given them. Harry did not use dark magic during the hunt. He was tempted. He was tempted constantly, in the way that someone who has been sober for months is tempted by the specific thing they gave up. The pathways were dormant, but not gone. The knowledge was in his head. The spells were in his memory. Every time a situation arose that dark magic could have solved faster, cleaner, more efficiently, and there were many such situations, the old training whispered. He didn't listen. He used the magic Snape had taught him. The grey area combat magic, the aggressive Patronus work, the defensive techniques that were powerful without being corrosive. He used standard magic with the precision of someone who had studied it from both sides and who understood exactly what it could and couldn't do. He was good, genuinely good, in a way that wasn't about dark power. The months of training with Snape had produced a fighter who was technically exceptional and emotionally grounded, which was a combination that the dark arts couldn't produce, because the dark arts sacrificed the grounding for the exception. Ron fought beside him. Hermione planned for them. The trio operated with the practiced efficiency of three people who had been through a crisis together and who trusted each other how trust was built, through failure and forgiveness and the stubborn, persistent refusal to leave. The locket was destroyed by Ron, who drove the sword of Gryffindor through it after facing his worst fears. Harry watched this, watched his best friend confront the thing that terrified him most and destroy it anyway, and felt pride, clean and warm and free of the sharp edges that dark-influenced emotions always carried. The cup was destroyed at Gringotts, in a mission that involved a dragon and more improvisation than planning and the specific, chaotic brilliance of three teenagers who were too stubborn to know when a plan was failing. The diadem was destroyed in the Room of Requirement during the Battle of Hogwarts in fire. Nagini was killed by Neville Longbottom, because some things were constants, and the scar. The forest. Harry walked into the Forbidden Forest at midnight, not with dark magic, not with the cold clarity that dark practice would have given him, not with the emotional blunting that would have made the walking easier. He walked in with everything. The fear, the grief, the love, the anger, the shame, the pride, the hope, the full emotional range that 9 months of dark practice had suppressed and 6 months of recovery had restored. He walked in feeling everything. He was terrified. The terror was not managed, not compressed, not channeled into something useful. It was just there. Raw, present, the terror of a 17-year-old walking toward his own death because the walking was necessary. He found the clearing. Voldemort was there, with the Death Eaters, with Hagrid bound and weeping. "Harry Potter," Voldemort said, "the boy who lived, come to die." Harry looked at him, at this man who had spent 50 years studying the dark arts, who had pushed further into the dark than any wizard in history, who had torn his soul into fragments and scattered them across the country in a desperate bid for immortality. Harry had been on that road. For 9 months, he'd walked the beginning of it. He'd felt what Voldemort had felt. The clarity, the power, the narrowing focus. He'd tasted what the dark arts offered, and he'd understood the appeal, and he'd come back from it. He understood Voldemort. Not sympathized, understood how a brilliant, frightened boy could become a monster through the accumulated effects of practice, could shrink his emotional range until only the dark emotions remained, could lose the capacity for love, for connection, for the simple, messy warmth of being human, could end up standing in a forest with a wand raised, incapable of understanding why the boy in front of him wasn't running. Harry wasn't running because he'd already been where Voldemort was going. He'd stood at the edge of the same abyss, and he'd looked in, and he'd come back. And the coming back had taught him the thing that Voldemort had never learned and could never learn. The power was not worth the cost. Voldemort raised his wand. "Avada Kedavra," Voldemort said. The green light crossed the clearing. Harry did not raise his wand. He did not cast a spell. He stood in the clearing with his arms at his sides and his eyes open, and his mother's love in his blood and his friend's love in his heart, and the full, complete, unblunted fear of a person who was choosing to die. The curse hit him. He fell. King's Cross, the white space, the bench. Dumbledore, sitting, smiling, looking better than he had in years, which was logical, given that he was dead. "Harry," Dumbledore said. "Professor," Harry said. "You came back from it," Dumbledore said. "The dark." "I came back," Harry said. "That was the thing I was most afraid of," Dumbledore said, "when I saw you beginning to walk that road. Not that you wouldn't have the strength to face Voldemort, that you'd face him having become something that couldn't feel the sacrifice." "I nearly did," Harry said. "But you didn't," Dumbledore said. "You stopped. You let people help you. You did the thing I was never quite able to do at your age. You trusted other people's judgment about your own state." "I trusted Ron," Harry said, "and Hermione, and Snape, which I never thought I'd say. Severus," Dumbledore said. "Yes, he was uniquely qualified to help you." "Because he'd been there," Harry said. "Because he'd been there and come back," Dumbledore said. "And because coming back cost him enough that he would not let it happen to someone else." Harry looked around the white space. "Am I dead?" "You are in the place between," Dumbledore said. "The Horcrux in your scar is dead. You are not, unless you choose to be." "And if I go back," Harry said. "Then you go back," Dumbledore said, "to finish it, without the Horcrux, without the dark arts, without anything except yourself." "Myself isn't much," Harry said. "Yourself is everything." Dumbledore said, "Yourself is the thing that walked this far, the thing that went into the dark and came out, the thing that your mother died to protect and that your friends refused to abandon." Harry sat on the bench next to Dumbledore in the white space between life and death and thought about the year that had brought him here, the books in the library, the first spell on the wall, the clarity and the power and the narrowing and the loss, the bathroom, the blood, the horror that had broken through, Snape in the corridor, Ron at 3 a.m, the slow, painful, humbling return of feeling. "I'm going back," Harry said. "I know," Dumbledore said. "Because there are people who need me to be there," Harry said, "and not the version of me that's effective. The version that's me, the messy version," Dumbledore said. "The messy version," Harry said. He went back. The Great Hall. Voldemort didn't understand what had happened. He had cast the killing curse. The boy had fallen. The Horcrux was destroyed. Voldemort could feel it. The seventh anchor severed. The boy should have been dead. The boy got up. Harry stood in the Great Hall and faced Voldemort for the last time. He was not carrying dark magic. He was not carrying the cold clarity, the emotional blunting, the combat reflexes that had been carved into him by months of practice. He had let all of that go. He was carrying the wand. The holly wand with the phoenix feather core, and the love. His mother's, in his blood, his friends, around him. "I know what you are," Harry said. "You are a child," Voldemort said. "I've been where you are," Harry said. "I've been on the road. The dark arts, the narrowing, the loss of everything except the power. I went there, Tom, for 9 months. And I came back." "You came back because you are weak," Voldemort said. "I came back because I had people," Harry said. "People who sat with me at 3 a.m. People who researched the damage and showed me the data. People who could feel the change in my magic and told me the truth about it. People who'd walked the road before and came to find me on it." "Sentiment," Voldemort said. "Love," Harry said, "which you can't feel, because you've been practicing the dark arts for 50 years and the practice has removed your capacity for it. You didn't lose your ability to love because you're evil, Tom. You lost it because you practiced it out of yourself. One spell at a time, over decades, until there was nothing left except the magic. I am the greatest wizard, you're the most powerful wizard," Harry said. "Power and greatness are different things. Power is what you have when you strip away everything else. Greatness is what you have when you don't. Voldemort raised his wand. Harry raised his Avada Kedavra. Expelliarmus, the spells met. The Elder Wand, whose allegiance had shifted through a chain that Voldemort had not understood, refused to kill its master. The killing curse rebounded. Voldemort fell. Harry stood in the great hall and looked at the body and felt everything. Grief and relief and exhaustion and triumph and sadness and the complicated feeling of looking at someone who had been your enemy and seeing, underneath the monstrousness, the frightened boy who had made the first wrong choice at 15 and spent the rest of his life accelerating away from it. He had stood where Voldemort had stood. The difference was that Harry had people who pulled him back, and Voldemort had not. The hall erupted. People were shouting. People were hugging. The war was over. Harry stood in the middle of it and let the noise wash over him and felt, with the full emotional range that the dark arts had tried to take from him and that his friends and his teacher and his own desperate choice had restored, the feeling of being alive. After, the recovery from the war was long. The recovery from the dark arts was longer. Harry spoke about it, privately, away from the prophet and ministry functions, but to the people who mattered. To Ron and Hermione in the Burrow kitchen, over tea that Molly made, in conversations that were sometimes long and sometimes just 3 sentences and a silence. To Ginny, who understood the texture of dark influence better than anyone, and whose patience with Harry's recovery was built on the foundation of her own. To Snape, who survived the war, survived Nagini barely, through an antivenom he'd been carrying since the snake started attending meetings, and who did not discuss his feelings about Harry's recovery, or about anything, because Snape did not discuss feelings. But who was there, in a professional capacity, as a consultant to the mind healer that Harry eventually, reluctantly, started seeing? The pathways atrophy without use, the mind healer said in their second session, but they don't disappear entirely. You'll feel the pull, on bad days, when things are hard. The dark arts will feel like an option. It does already, Harry said. That's normal, the healer said. The goal isn't to eliminate the pull. The goal is to build enough other things that the pull doesn't win. What other things? Harry said. Everything else, the healer said. Relationships, work, the small pleasures that dark magic suppresses, laughter, meals with friends, Quidditch, whatever makes you feel alive that isn't connected to power. Harry built those things. Slowly, imperfectly, with the specific clumsiness of someone who was relearning the basic machinery of emotional life after spending 9 months shutting it down. He went back to the Burrow. He ate Molly's cooking. He played Quidditch with Ron and Ginny and George in the garden, not competitively, not strategically, just the joy of flying and the wind and the golden afternoon and the sound of a quaffle being thrown badly. He sat in the common room. Hogwarts reopened. Harry returned for a partial 8th year to finish the education the war had interrupted. And he talked to people. Not about the dark arts, about charms, homework and Quidditch results and whether the new defence teacher was any good and the 100 ordinary topics that constituted the texture of a school year. He felt the pull. On bad days, and there were bad days, days when the grief for Dumbledore was heavy, and the guilt about Draco was present, and the shame about the 9 months was close to the surface, the pull was strong. The memory of clarity, the memory of power, the memory of magic that felt like an extension rather than a tool. He did not follow the pull. He sat with it. He acknowledged it. He told Ron about it, sometimes in the dormitory at night, and Ron would listen and then say something like, "Yeah, that sounds rough. Want to play chess?" And the chess would help because the chess was present tense and the pull was about the past, and present tense always won if you gave it enough room. He apologized to Draco. in person. In the hospital wing, when Draco had recovered enough to receive visitors, but not enough to refuse them. I used dark magic on you, Harry said. In the bathroom, the Sectum Sempra, you were crying, and I attacked you. Draco looked at him from the hospital bed with the expression of someone who was deciding how to respond to an apology from a person they'd spent 6 years hating and who had recently cut them open. I know, Draco said. I'm sorry, Harry said. You should be, Draco said. I am, Harry said. Draco was quiet for a moment. My Aunt Bellatrix used dark magic on me once. When I was 7, my mother was away and Bellatrix was watching me and I broke something, a vase, some family heirloom, and she cursed me. Not badly. A stinging jinx amplified with dark intent. It hurt more than a normal jinx. I cried. Harry said nothing. The difference between what you did and what she did, Draco said, is that you're here, in this room, telling me you're sorry. It doesn't make it all right, Draco said. But it makes it different. Harry looked at him. At Draco Malfoy, who had been on the other side of this war, who had been raised in the dark arts, who understood them from the inside the way Ginny understood them from the inside, as someone who had been hurt by them before choosing them. Thank you for talking to me, Harry said. Don't make a habit of it, Draco said. Harry left the hospital wing. The conversation was not forgiveness. Draco was not a person who gave forgiveness easily, and Harry was not a person who assumed he deserved it. It was something smaller and more functional. An acknowledgement. A line drawn between what had happened and what would happen next. It was enough to walk out with. 5 years later. Harry was 22. He was an aura. He was competent, respected, and held in the particular esteem that came from being both a war hero and a person who had publicly acknowledged making serious mistakes during the war. He had told the story to a small audience of aura trainees during a training session on the dangers of dark magic exposure. Snape had been in the room. As a consulting expert, Harry had told the trainees about the summer at Grimmauld Place, the books, the practice, the 9 months, the bathroom, the recovery. He had told them with the honesty of someone who had decided that the story was more useful shared than hidden. The dark arts work, Harry said to the room of trainees. I want to be clear about that. They are functionally superior to standard combat magic in most direct engagement scenarios. The reflective inversion is a better shield than Protego. The Vincula Mortis is a more complete disarmament than Expelliarmus. If you're measuring effectiveness by outcome per cast, the dark arts win. The room was quiet. They win the battle, Harry said. And they lose the war. The war inside you. The one between the person you are and the person the practice is turning you into. He told them about the emotional blunting, about the narrowing, about the moment in the bathroom when a spell came out of him that he hadn't chosen to cast. The moment you lose the ability to choose, Harry said, is the moment you've lost everything the dark arts promised to give you. Power without choice isn't power, it's compulsion. Snape, from the back of the room, said nothing. But he gave Harry a nod, fractional, barely visible, the Snape equivalent of a standing ovation. After the session, Harry walked through the ministry corridors and thought about the road he'd walked and the road he'd left and the distance between them, which was measured not in spells or techniques or magical theory, but in the simple, unremarkable, daily choice to feel things fully rather than managing them down to a usable subset. He went home. The flat was warm. Ron was coming over for dinner because Ron came over for dinner most Tuesdays, and Hermione was coming because Hermione came wherever Ron came, and Ginny was bringing dessert because Ginny was Ginny and Ginny brought dessert. He cooked. Harry had never become a good cook, which was a failure he was comfortable with because the goodness of the cooking was not the point of the cooking. The point was the doing of it. Standing in a kitchen, making food for people he loved, using his hands for something that had nothing to do with magic. They arrived. Ron ate too fast. Hermione told him to slow down. Ginny ate the dessert first, because Ginny had always eaten the dessert first and nobody had ever successfully argued her out of it. Harry sat at the table with the people who had saved him, not from Voldemort, not from the war, from himself, and felt the warmth of it. The imprecise, messy, unglamorous warmth of a Tuesday evening with people who knew everything about him, including the worst parts, and who were here anyway. The pull was there. It was always there. On the edge of things, in the quiet moments, the memory of clarity and power and magic that felt like an extension of his soul. It would always be there. The mind healer had told him this, and he'd accepted it. How you accept the weather, not happily, not willingly, but with the pragmatic understanding that some things didn't go away, and that not going away was different from winning. The pull didn't win tonight. The warmth was stronger, the table was stronger, the love was stronger. He ate his badly cooked dinner. He laughed at Ron's joke. He argued with Hermione about Charm's theory, and lost, which was the only possible outcome of arguing with Hermione about Charm's theory, and which he found, in his recovery and his returning emotional range, genuinely enjoyable. He was alive. He was feeling things. He was here. Not the version of Harry Potter who had stood in a basement at 3 a.m, casting dark spells at a wall and feeling the sharp, beautiful clarity of magic without guardrails. Not the version who had sat in rooms watching people with the cold assessment of a person running tactical calculations. Not the version who had attacked a crying boy in a bathroom because the training had chosen the response. The version who had all of those versions inside him and who chose every day not to be them. That was the victory. Not the war, not the battle, not the forest. The daily choice. The Tuesday evening. The badly cooked dinner. He was here. That was enough. This is the story of the chosen one who chose wrong and then chose again. You can't redeem yourself from a choice you made deliberately. The recovery. The long, difficult, unglamorous process of rebuilding the emotional range that 9 months of practice nearly destroyed. The dark arts work. They are effective. They deliver what they promise. And the delivery costs you the ability to enjoy what you fought for. Harry Potter learned this. He learned it the hard way. Through practice, through damage, through a bleeding boy on a bathroom floor and a night in a corridor with a teacher who had walked the same road and come back from it at greater cost. He came back. Not alone. With Ron at 3 a.m, with Hermione and her research, with Ginny and her recognition, with Snape and his road, with Dumbledore and his warning, with the people who refused to let him go where he was going. He came back. He was here. That was everything. Let us know what you'd like to see next. Expanded threads what Ron saw Ron Weasley notice things about people, how Hermione noticed things about books, comprehensively, instinctively, and without the need to justify the noticing with a theoretical framework. He noticed Harry change in September. Ron didn't have the sensitivity to magical signatures that Ginny had, didn't have the analytical framework that Hermione was building. What Ron saw was behavioural. Harry stopped fidgeting. Harry had always fidgeted, bounced his knee during class, drummed his fingers on tables, the restless physicality of someone who was more comfortable in motion than in stillness. In September, the fidgeting stopped. Harry sat still. Harry watched rooms. Harry's eyes tracked people how a cat tracked movement, not hostile, but assessing, with the particular quality of someone who is evaluating threats and capabilities on a continuous basis. Ron noticed this and said nothing, because Ron had learned over 5 years of friendship with Harry Potter that there were things Harry would tell you when he was ready, and things Harry would never tell you and that the difference between the two was patience. In October, he noticed the wand grip. Harry held his wand differently, not the standard classroom grip that Flitwick taught, but a tighter, more integrated hold that suggested a different tradition. Ron didn't know enough about wand technique to identify the tradition. He just knew it was different. In November, he noticed the sleep pattern. Harry was sleeping less. This wasn't unusual for Harry. Harry had never been a consistent sleeper. The scar and the dreams had seen to that. But the quality of the not sleeping had changed. Previously, Harry's insomnia had been anxious. He'd toss, wake Ron with sounds, thrash through nightmares. Now Harry simply didn't sleep. He lay in bed, still, with his eyes open, and when Ron woke at 3 a.m. to use the bathroom, Harry was always awake, always still, always watching the ceiling. "You all right?" Ron said one night. "Fine," Harry said. "You're awake, can't sleep. You haven't slept properly in weeks," Ron said. "I'm thinking," Harry said. "About what?" "Things," Harry said. This was the Harry equivalent of a locked door. Ron recognized it and backed off. But he filed the interaction, along with the stillness, the wand grip, the room watching, the loss of fidgeting, in the place where he kept his understanding of Harry, which was not a notebook like Hermione's, but was, in its own way, equally comprehensive. In December, he noticed the emotional change. This was the hardest to describe, and the most disturbing. Harry had always been emotionally present, had laughed easily, had gotten angry quickly, had worn his feelings close to the surface in the way of someone who hadn't learned to manage them because nobody had taught him. The Harry of previous years was reactive, impulsive, transparent. The Harry of December was none of those things. He didn't get angry when Malfoy provoked him. This was unprecedented. Harry and Draco had been exchanging provocations since first year with the reliability of a weather pattern. Now, Harry looked at Draco and nothing. Not restraint, not management, nothing. As though the emotional circuitry that connected Draco's provocations to Harry's anger had been disconnected. He didn't laugh at Ron's jokes. This was the one that hurt. Ron's jokes were not sophisticated. They were the jokes of a 16-year-old boy who had grown up in a house full of brothers and who used humour how other people used breathing. Harry had always laughed at Ron's jokes, even the bad ones, even the ones that were really bad, because the laughing was part of the friendship in the way that the air was part of the atmosphere. Harry didn't laugh. He smiled sometimes, in the way of someone performing the social expectation of amusement. But the smile didn't reach his eyes, and the laugh didn't come, and Ron sat with this, how you sat with a toothache, aware of it constantly, unable to fix it, unwilling to ignore it. "Harry's different," Ron said to Hermione, in December, in the library. "I know," Hermione said. "Not just the reading and the defense stuff," Ron said. He's missing. Part of him is missing. The emotional blunting," Hermione said. "The what?" Ron said. She told him about the research. The Department of Mysteries studies from the 1970s. The progressive emotional suppression. The self-concealing nature of the change. Ron listened. He listened the way he always listened to things that mattered, completely, without interruption, with the focused stillness that people mistook for inattention because Ron's focus didn't look the way people expected focus to look. "So he can't feel things," Ron said. "He can feel some things," Hermione said. "The intent emotions, anger, determination, the desire to protect, those get amplified. Everything else gets reduced." "Love?" Ron said. "Reduced," Hermione said. "Happiness?" Ron said. "Reduced," Hermione said. "Fun?" Ron said. "Reduced," Hermione said. Ron was quiet for a long time. "He hasn't laughed since October," Ron said. "I know," Hermione said. "That's 3 months," Ron said. 3 months without laughing. Harry, who laughed at everything, who laughed at my terrible jokes. Who? He trailed off. "I know," Hermione said again. What do we do? Ron said. I've tried talking to him, Hermione said. He argues. He's very good at arguing now, better than he was. The dark arts have sharpened his reasoning without softening his certainty. So we can't argue him out of it, Ron said. Not with logic, Hermione said. He can out-argue me on this. His position is internally consistent. Then we don't use logic, Ron said. Hermione looked at him. We be here, Ron said. We don't leave. We don't give up. We sit at the table and we eat meals with him and we talk to him about Quidditch and we play chess with him and we wait. Wait for what? Hermione said. For the Harry part to fight back, Ron said. Because it's still in there. The real Harry. The one who laughs. He's still in there, and at some point something's going to happen that the blunting can't manage, and the real Harry is going to come through. What if it doesn't? Hermione said. It will, Ron said. Because he's Harry. And Harry's whole thing, his whole thing since we met him, is that he fights. He fights Voldemort. He fights Umbridge. He fights anyone who tries to take away the things he cares about. The dark magic is trying to take away the things he cares about. At some point, Harry's going to fight it. Ron, Hermione said. What? That's actually very insightful, she said. Don't sound so surprised, Ron said. I'm not surprised, she said. I'm impressed. Also don't sound so impressed, Ron said. I'm right about people. That's my thing. He was right. The bathroom happened 3 months later. The Sectum Sempra. The blood. The horror that broke through. Ron was waiting for it. Waiting how you waited for a storm to break. Knowing it was coming, knowing it was necessary. Dreading it. When it broke, when Harry came back from the bathroom with blood on his shoes and his face, doing something that Ron hadn't seen on it in months, genuine emotion, Ron was ready. He was there at 3 a.m. He sat on the bed. He said the things that needed saying. And when Harry said, I need to stop, Ron's response was, good. One word. The right word. The word that said, I've been waiting for you to say that, and I'm here, and we're going to do this together. The Hermione File Hermione's research on dark magic's effects on the caster filled 3 notebooks by February. The research was exhaustive, as Hermione's research was always exhaustive. Not just comprehensive, but over-comprehensive. The work of someone who responded to fear by accumulating information until the information created the illusion of control. She had found the Department of Mysteries studies. She had found the historical precedents, wizards who had gone dark and returned. Wizards who had gone dark and not returned, the statistical analysis of outcomes based on duration and intensity of practice. She had found the neurological theory, the magical equivalent of brain chemistry, how deep intent casting altered the pathways in the magical cortex the same way that repetitive physical practice altered muscle memory. She had also found something she hadn't expected, a study on the reversal of dark magic effects. The study was from 1978, conducted by an unspeakable named Ilara Thornton, and it had been buried in the Department of Mysteries archives because its conclusions were politically inconvenient. The study showed that dark magic damage to the emotional cortex was reversible, fully reversible, given sufficient time and the right conditions. The conditions were not simple. First, complete cessation of dark practice. No exceptions, no just one more, no grey area justifications. The pathways had to atrophy through disuse. Second, sustained positive emotional engagement. The emotional range that dark magic suppressed needed to be actively re-exercised. Laughter, love, fear, grief, the full spectrum, practiced how you practiced any atrophied capability. Through use. Third, community. The reversal didn't happen in isolation. The study showed that people who recovered from dark magic damage almost always did so within a network of supportive relationships. The emotions that dark magic suppressed were social emotions, empathy, love, connection. Restoring them required the social context in which they existed. Hermione read this study 4 times. She underlined the word community. She thought about Harry, sitting in the common room at night, alone, still, watching rooms. She thought about Ron, who had said we be here. Ron was right. Ron was right about people, which was his thing, and his thing was exactly right for this. She didn't tell Harry about the study immediately. She waited, an act of patience that cost her more than most people would have understood, because Hermione's instinct was to deploy information the moment she had it, and waiting while Harry continued to practice dark magic was physically uncomfortable for someone who equated knowledge sharing with problem solving. She waited because the information would be useful only when Harry was ready to hear it, and Harry was not ready to hear it until the bathroom, until the blood, until the horror. After the bathroom, she went to Snape. "I have research," she said. Snape looked at her across his desk. "Miss Granger, it is 7 in the morning. I have research on the reversal of dark magic emotional effects," she said. A Department of Mysteries study from 1978. The author is Elara Thornton. The study shows full reversibility given the correct conditions. Snape's expression didn't change. "I know the study," Snape said. "Then you know the conditions," Hermione said. "Cessation, positive engagement, community," Snape said. "Yes, you've already known," Hermione said. "This whole time. I have known that reversal is possible since I reversed my own damage 20 years ago," Snape said. "I did not know the mechanism was documented until later." "Then, why didn't you?" "Because Potter was not ready to hear it until now," Snape said, "and because telling someone that recovery is possible while they are still in the grip of the thing they need to recover from is not helpful." "It is, academic," Hermione stared at him. The word academic from Snape was clearly intended as an insult, and the fact that it stung meant it was landing. "I am not being academic," she said. "You are being Hermione Granger," Snape said. "Which is a related condition." She stopped. "All right. Fine. What do we do now?" "Now," Snape said, "we do the thing that should have been done months ago. We provide Potter with the environment for recovery. Cessation. I am confiscating the books. Positive engagement. That is your department and Mr. Weasley's. Community. We're his community," Hermione said. "Yes," Snape said. "You are. Which means the recovery depends on you doing what you've been doing. Being present, being persistent, being annoyingly, relentlessly available." "That's not a compliment," Hermione said. "It is the highest compliment I am capable of giving a Gryffindor," Snape said. She left his office with the distinct impression that Severus Snape had just told her she was doing a good job, wrapped in enough contempt that it was deniable, and that the contempt was itself a form of communication that meant, "I trust you with this." She went to find Ron. "We're his community," she said. "Obviously," Ron said. "Snape says the recovery depends on us being present," she said. "I've been saying that for months," Ron said. "I know," she said. "I should have listened earlier." "You should have," Ron said. "But here we are." "Here we are," she said. They were there. Through the withdrawal, the tremors, the emotional floods, the 3 in the morning crying, through the Snape lessons, through the slow, painful rebuilding of Harry's emotional range, through the days when Harry was awful to be around because recovering emotions are not organized emotions, and grief and guilt and shame arrived in random order at inconvenient times. They were there because they were Ron and Hermione, and being there was the thing they did. Ginny and the diary parallel the conversation in February was the conversation Ginny had been dreading since she first felt the change in Harry's magical signature. She knew what the dark arts felt like from the inside. She'd spent a year as a vessel for Tom Riddle's soul, 11 years old, alone, writing in a diary that wrote back, feeling the warmth drain out of the world one conversation at a time. The diary had been a masterclass in dark magic's emotional effects, compressed into a single year rather than spread across months of practice. She recognized the signature in Harry the same way a burn victim recognized the smell of fire. "You feel different," she told him, and she'd meant it literally. His magic felt different. The warmth had gone out of it. The quality that Harry's magic had always carried, a kind of brightness, an openness, the magical equivalent of a room with all the windows open, had been replaced by something sharper, denser, more concentrated. He'd felt this before. In herself, during the diary year. The narrowing. The focus. The loss of the peripheral vision that let you enjoy things that weren't the central obsession. What she told Harry in February was the most honest thing she could say, and the hardest, that she'd been inside the dark arts, and that she recognized what she was seeing. What she didn't tell him was the rest of it. She didn't tell him about the nights in first year when she'd woken up with blood on her hands and no memory of how it got there. She didn't tell him about the roosters, the ones she'd killed under the diary's influence, the ones whose blood she'd used to write messages on the walls, the ones she'd killed while the part of her that was still Ginny screamed silently inside the prison of her own body. She didn't tell him, because telling him would have been about her and not about him, and because the conversation needed to be about him. But after the bathroom, after the blood, after Harry stopped and the withdrawal began, she told him. They were in the common room in March. Harry was in the worst week of the withdrawal, the emotional flooding, the uncontrolled grief and guilt, the sensation of feeling everything at maximum intensity after months of feeling almost nothing. He was sitting in the armchair looking at his hands. "I know what the coming back feels like," Ginny said. Harry looked up. "From the diary," Ginny said. "After they destroyed it, after he was gone from me. The coming back took me 2 years. 2 years, Harry said. Everything was loud, she said. After a year of him dampening things, managing what I felt, choosing which emotions I was allowed to have, when he was gone, everything came back at once. It was like having the volume turned up on every sense simultaneously." "Yeah," Harry said. I cried for 3 weeks, she said. Not continuously, but most days, multiple times, over things that shouldn't have been worth crying about. A sunset, a meal Mum made, George telling a joke. The crying it was the feelings coming back, and the feelings were too big because the container had been compressed. The container, Harry said. Whatever it is that holds feelings, she said. The capacity. The diary had shrunk it. When the diary was gone, the feelings were the same size, but the container was smaller, and everything overflowed. Harry was quiet. "It gets better," she said. "The container expands. The feelings regulate. You learn to hold them again without the overflow." "How long?" Harry said. "Different for everyone," she said. "For me, 2 years. For you, I don't know." The mechanism was different. The diary was possession. What you did was voluntary. "Does that make it harder or easier?" Harry said. "Harder, I think," she said, "because the voluntary part means you have to forgive yourself for choosing it. I didn't choose the diary. I was 11 and I didn't know what it was. You knew what you were doing. You chose it. I chose it for good reasons," Harry said. "I know," she said. "But good reasons don't undo the damage. They just make the forgiving more complicated." Harry looked at her. At Ginny Weasley, who was 15, who was fierce and honest, and who carried her own history of dark magic damage with the particular grace of someone who had decided that the damage was not going to define her. "How did you forgive yourself?" Harry said. "For the diary year. For the things that happened while I haven't," she said. "Not completely. There are things I did under Tom's influence that I'll carry forever. The roosters. The messages." She paused. You carry it. You don't forget it. You just carry it alongside everything else, and you make sure the everything else is bigger. The everything else, Harry said. Family, she said. Friends, Quidditch, making jokes, being angry about things that deserve anger and happy about things that deserve happiness. All the things that the dark arts take away, you rebuild them. And the rebuilding is slow and it's hard and it's not glamorous and it's the most important thing you'll ever do. Harry sat with this. Thank you, he said. Don't thank me, she said. Thank me by getting better. That might take a while, he said. I've got time, she said. The training with Snape, what it actually looked like the lessons began in April and continued through the end of term and into the summer. They were not comfortable. Snape was not a kind teacher. He had never been a kind teacher, and the fact that he was now actively trying to help Harry did not change this. Kindness was not in Snape's available range, and pretending it was would have been patronizing in a way that both of them would have found intolerable. What Snape was? Precise. Demanding, absolutely, unreservedly honest about what Harry was doing wrong and why. Your shield charm is adequate, Snape said in the first lesson. Thanks, Harry said. I did not say good, Snape said. Adequate. It will stop a standard hex. It will not stop a determined attacker with combat training. What will? Harry said. What you were using before, Snape said. The dark magic, which we are no longer using. So what do we use instead? Harry said. We use everything else, Snape said, and we use it better than you've been using it. The training covered 4 areas. First, the Patronus as a combat weapon. Harry could cast a Patronus. He'd been able to since 3rd year. What Snape taught him was to use the Patronus offensively, to project it not just as a shield against Dementors, but as an active disruption of dark magic. The corporeal Patronus, Snape explained, was fundamentally incompatible with dark curses. A Patronus projected into the path of a dark curse didn't just block it, it unmade it, the positive emotion at the core dissolving the negative emotion that powered the curse. It's an anti-dark weapon, Harry said. It is the anti-dark weapon, Snape said, and it is one you already possess, and that requires no dark practice to maintain. The limitation, the combat Patronus required the caster to sustain positive emotion under extreme duress. In battle, while being attacked, while watching friends being hurt. This was harder, considerably harder than summoning a Patronus in a classroom. Harry practiced. Snape attacked him with standard hexes, not dark magic, while Harry tried to maintain the Patronus. The first attempt lasted 4 seconds before the stag dissolved under the pressure of a stinging jinx. Again, Snape said. By May, Harry could hold the Patronus for 3 minutes under sustained attack. By June, he could project it while casting other spells simultaneously. By July, the stag could operate semi-independently, moving, intercepting curses, providing a mobile shield that Harry didn't have to consciously maintain. That is acceptable, Snape said, after a session where Harry's Patronus had intercepted 6 consecutive hexes while Harry dueled Snape simultaneously. Acceptable, Harry said. Not good? I will inform you when you achieve good, Snape said. Today is not that day. Second, non-verbal magic at combat speed. Harry had been practicing non-verbal casting since 6th year. What Snape added was speed, the ability to cast non-verbally at the pace that combat required, which was faster than classroom practice, faster than most adults could achieve, and which Snape demonstrated with a casual proficiency that reminded Harry, uncomfortably, that Snape was one of the most skilled duelists alive. You think the incantation, Snape said. That's too slow. Stop thinking the incantation. Think the outcome. That's not how. That is exactly how, Snape said. You don't think protego. You think shield. You don't think stupefy. You think, stop. The incantation is a training wheel. Remove it. This took weeks. But by June, Harry was casting non-verbally without the internal monologue of the incantation, pure intent, directed through the wand, without the intermediary of words. It was faster. Significantly faster. Third, environmental magic. Using the surroundings as weapons and defences, transfiguring the floor into obstacles, conjuring barriers from available materials, turning the space itself into a tactical advantage. Your enemy expects wand-to-wand combat, Snape said. Give them wall-to-face combat. Did you just make a joke? Harry said. I did not, Snape said. Levitate the desk. Harry levitated the desk and launched it at Snape, who stepped aside with the casual economy of movement that came from decades of not being where the desk was going. Better, Snape said. Now do it without me seeing you do it. Fourth, occlumency. Real occlumency, not the adversarial battering ram approach Snape had used in 5th year, which had been designed to fail because Snape hadn't actually wanted Harry to succeed at the time. Proper occlumency, the art of organising the mind, of compartmentalising emotions without suppressing them, of maintaining mental discipline under pressure without losing access to the full emotional range. This is what you should have been taught 2 years ago, Harry said. Yes, Snape said. It is. Why weren't you? Because 2 years ago I was a spy, a teacher, and a man managing 2 masters simultaneously, and the time available for properly teaching an arrogant 15-year-old the subtleties of mental defence was limited. And now? Now Snape said, I have decided that teaching you properly is more important than maintaining my professional detachment. That almost sounded like you care, Harry said. Do not push your luck, Snape said. Harry didn't push his luck. He practiced the occlumency as Snape taught it, with discipline, with structure, with the understanding that the goal was not to suppress emotions but to organise them, to have the full range available and the ability to choose which one to deploy in any given moment. By the end of the summer, Harry was a different fighter than the one who had entered Snape's office in April. The dark arts had given him more raw power. But the dark arts had given him more raw power, which was the whole point and the whole problem. Better in the integrated sense. Better at using what he had without damaging himself in the process. Better at being effective and human simultaneously. You are now, Snape said, at the end of the last lesson before 7th year, a competent wizard. Competent, Harry said, after months of training. Competent, I do not give higher marks, Snape said. Competent from me is equivalent to outstanding from anyone else, Harry said. I know. Then stop fishing for compliments, Snape said. Harry left the dungeon. In the corridor he found himself smiling, the real kind, the kind that happened without performance. He was smiling because Snape had taught him something valuable, and because the teaching had been done with complete integrity, and because, underneath all the contempt and the history and the impossible complexity of their relationship, Severus Snape had spent 4 months making sure that Lily Potter's son was ready for what was coming. The apology to Draco. Harry went to the hospital wing on a Thursday afternoon in May, 3 weeks after the bathroom. Draco was sitting up in bed. The wounds had healed, Snape's counter-curse had closed them, and Madame Pomfrey's follow-up care had dealt with the residual damage. But there were scars, thin white lines across Draco's chest that would fade but never fully disappear. Can I come in? Harry said, from the doorway. Draco looked at him. The expression was not hostile, it was worse than hostile. It was wary. The wariness of someone who had been attacked by a person they'd been having a conversation with, and who was now managing the specific trauma of not knowing when the next attack was coming. Why? Draco said. To apologise, Harry said. Apologise, Draco said. He said it flatly, testing the weight of it. For what I did in the bathroom, Harry said. for the Sectum Sempra, for all of it meaning the dark magic, Draco said. All of it meaning everything since last summer, Harry said. I've been. He stopped. Found the words. I was studying dark magic from the Black Library for months, practicing it. The spell I used on you it came out of the training. The pathways I'd built activated before I could choose. The pathways, Draco said. Dark magic builds neural pathways, Harry said, in the magical cortex. The more you practice, the stronger the pathways get. After enough practice, the pathways fire automatically. The spell I cast on you wasn't a choice. It was a reflex. That's not actually an apology, Draco said. That's an explanation. Harry was quiet. An apology is, I'm sorry I did this to you and I take responsibility for it, Draco said. An explanation is, here's why my brain did this without my permission. Those are different things. You're right, Harry said. I'm sorry. I take responsibility. I chose to study the dark arts. I chose to build the pathways. The fact that the specific spell was a reflex doesn't change the fact that I created the conditions for the reflex to fire. Draco looked at him. Sit down, Draco said. Harry sat in the chair next to the bed. I told you, Draco said, in the corridor. I told you that you were something worse than a Death Eater, someone who thinks they can use the tools without becoming the person. You were right, Harry said. I know I was right, Draco said. I've been right about the dark arts since I was old enough to understand what they did to my father. The question is whether you know I was right. I know, Harry said. Then what are you going to do about it? Draco said. I've stopped, Harry said. Snape took the books. I'm not practicing anymore. He's training me in alternatives, Snape, Draco said. Snape walked this road, Harry said, when he was our age. I know, Draco said. My mother told me. She said Snape was brilliant with the dark arts and that the brilliance nearly destroyed him. He paused. She said the only thing that saved him was a muggle-born girl from Gryffindor. Harry looked at his hands. Your mother, Draco said. Yes, Harry said. The ward was quiet around them. Outside, April was doing what April did, the grounds greening, the lake reflecting the longer days. My scars, Draco said, touching his chest through the hospital gown. They'll be permanent. Pomfrey said, they'll fade but never disappear. I know, Harry said. I'm going to carry your mistake on my body for the rest of my life, Draco said. I know, Harry said. Good, Draco said. Because I want you to know that every time I look in a mirror, I'm going to see what the dark arts did through you. And I want that to matter to you. I want it to be something you carry. I'll carry it, Harry said. See that you do, Draco said. Harry stood up. At the door, he turned back. Draco, he said. What? The offer I made, Harry said, about protecting your family. I can't do it the way I was going to, the dark wards, the blood magic. But if there are other ways, Potter, Draco said. Go away. But go away, Draco said. And come back when you've found a way that doesn't involve anything you learned at 3 a.m. from a dead family's library. Harry left. He came back 3 weeks later. With Dumbledore's help, and McGonagall's, and the orders, he found a way. Standard protective wards, layered and reinforced through legitimate means, placed on the Malfoy properties by qualified ward crafters. The protection wasn't as strong as what the dark wards would have provided. It was strong enough. It was clean. Draco accepted it without thanking Harry, which was the most Draco response possible, and which Harry accepted because he wasn't looking for thanks. He was looking for the one thing the apology had offered, the beginning of making it right. Not making it right, beginning to make it right. The distinction mattered. The moment Harry knew he was coming back, it happened in June, during a Quidditch game. A pickup game in the garden at the Burrow, the kind of disorganised, rules-optional flying that the Weasleys treated as a basic household activity. Ron and Ginny and the twins against Harry and whoever else showed up, which today was Hermione reluctantly, badly, with the Hermione approach to physical activity that was gameness without aptitude, and Neville prisonly competent because Neville had been getting better at everything since 5th year. Harry caught the quaffle. The game was using a quaffle rather than a snitch, because the garden wasn't big enough for snitch searching, and threw it through the makeshift hoop that George had hung from the oak tree. And he laughed. Not the performing laugh, not the social expectation smile, the real laugh, the one that came from the chest, that arrived without warning, that was produced by the simple, uncomplicated pleasure of flying in a garden and throwing a ball through a hoop. He laughed, and the laughing continued for longer than the joke warranted, longer than the goal warranted, because the goal was not the cause. The cause was the return. The laughter was the return of the capacity for laughter, which had been suppressed for 9 months and which had been slowly, painfully, incompletely rebuilding since March. Ron heard it. Ron was on the other team, 20 feet away, and he heard Harry laugh, and his head turned and his face did something that Ron would have been mortified to have described in public. It crumpled. Not with sadness, with relief. The specific, devastating relief of someone who has been waiting for months to hear a sound they love and who has just heard it. Ron turned away before Harry could see his face. He grabbed the quaffle and flew in the opposite direction and shouted something about the score that was probably wrong. Ginny caught it. She was next to Harry, had been watching, and her face was doing the opposite of crumpling. It was opening, the recognition of someone who had been through the same thing and who knew what the return of laughter meant. "There you are," she said. "What?" Harry said. "The laugh," she said. "You laughed." "I've been laughing," Harry started. "No," she said. "You've been smiling and making sounds." That was a laugh. The real kind. Harry was still on his broom, 20 feet above the garden, with the summer air warm around him and the sound of his own laughter still resonating in his chest. "Yeah," he said. "I think it was." "That's the beginning," she said. "When the laughter comes back, the rest follows." She flew away. Harry hovered in the air and felt the warmth, not the sharp clarity of dark magic, not the focused intensity that came from deep intent casting. The messy, imprecise, unglamorous warmth of a summer afternoon in a garden with people he loved. He was coming back. The recovery wouldn't be complete for months, for years, in the larger sense. The pathways were dormant but not gone. The pull was present. The scars on Draco's chest were permanent. The shame was permanent. The knowledge of what he'd been capable of was permanent. But the laughter was back. The laughter was real. That was the beginning of everything else. This is the story. A good person picked up bad tools and discovered that the tools worked, and that working was seductive, and that the seduction was progressive, and that the progression was invisible to the person experiencing it. He came back because he had people. A friend who sat with him at 3 a.m. A friend who researched the damage and brought the data. A girl who had been possessed by the same darkness and who recognized the symptoms. A teacher who had walked the same road and who used his own scars as a map. The dark arts are real. The temptation is real. The damage is real. And the recovery is real, slow, painful, humbling, dependent on the irreplaceable, non-magical quality of having people who won't let you go where you're going. He laughed in a garden in June, and the laughter was the beginning, and the beginning was enough. He was coming back. He came back. He was here.